physical meeting location will be available at this time. To access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL on the agenda and at the website of the PAB. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, you can use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by telephone, use the number on the agenda at the website as well and enter the meeting ID there. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 and wait to be recognized. Great. Shall we do the roll call?
Yes. Board Member Calavita will not be here today. Chair Chang,
Here.
Board Member Harris,
Here.
Board Member Lefwich,
Here.
Board Member Levine,
Here.
Vice Chair Mizell,
You're just barely.
Board Member Moore,
Here.
Board Member Owens,
Here.
and Board Member Ramsey.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum, Chair.
Okay, great. How about on the agenda? Are there any questions or comments on the agenda?
Yes, Chair, I'd ask if we could suspend the rules for item. Sorry, item 10C, policy 79, military equipment. I'd like for us to be able to hear from Mr. John Lindsay Pullen, at least briefly, that policy and his view as someone who's been very active in development of that policy, really for years now.
If you'd like to elevate him as a panelist at that time?
Yes, and I'd like to allow the board to ask him questions and to respond.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I don't have a problem with it. Are there any other questions or comments on that?
Chair,
Yeah.
I would tend to think we would save that for when we got to the item. The current item under consideration is approval of the agenda itself.
I see. Okay. So when we get to the item, then Vice Chair, if you would please make that request again. Thank you. How about other comments or questions about the agenda itself, approval of such or changes? I'm not seeing any hands or hearing any comments or questions. Can we do that by consensus, Director Lee?
Yes.
So by consensus, do we need a motion actually to approve?
Yeah, a motion would be better.
Okay. Can
I
someone
move
move?
that we approve the minutes. I move that we approve the agenda.
Great. Board Member Lefwich, and then is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great. Board Member Moore. And are there any objections to the motions? Not hearing or seeing any, so moved. Agenda approved. Public comment. Let's see who would like to speak.
Excuse me, Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Could you just note for the record that I am here, and as well as Investigator Thomas, and that Lieutenant Montgomery is here.
Absolutely. And thanks for joining, Lieutenant Montgomery, Investigator Thomas. Nice to see you again, both of you. And of course, Director Lee is here. And other than Board Member Calavita, I think we have everybody here. We did a roll call earlier. Public comment, looks like we have two persons, Rivka Palatnik, and then Ms. Saganor, and then a third, Jennifer Tu. I will, let me share the screen so you can see the minutes really quickly. And I'll start up the timer. Okay.
Okay, shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I want to share with you what I know about developments in the DPA search process, because there's not been enough transparency throughout. Much of what I've learned is through my network of community activists. And if I run a little over the 3 minutes, please bear with me, because I may actually be more up to date than the board members who are on this subcommittee. I'm just a public member, not allowed to speak during our report. So yesterday at 4 p.m., the city council had a special meeting where they went into a closed session on the DPA selection. Originally, we had heard that they were going to actually begin interviewing finalists, but because of challenges to the legitimacy of what's transpired, they now are going to consider all 6 of the candidates whom the city manager chose to be formally interviewed. And this is because once the buyers group did a first narrowing down to the 10 qualified candidates, it was the city council and mayor who were supposed to choose from the 10 who would get to be formally interviewed. But it seems that the city manager did the choosing. Okay. And the interviews of the 6 were supposed to be done by the mayor and council and the PAB's director search subcommittee. But instead, the city manager took over and set up panels chosen by her who interviewed the 6 people. Then she was supposed to submit of those 6, 3 for the final consideration by the council. So community activists challenged all of this because it's supposed to be independent of the city manager as much as possible. And now we've asked the council not only to look back at the 6 who were interviewed, which they now are going to do, or in the process of doing, we also asked them even to take a quick look back at the 10, because the city manager inappropriately eliminated 4 of those 10. And we happen to know that one of them was an excellent candidate that we community activists happen to know about. So, to my knowledge, what the council actually did in yesterday's closed session was talk about who they actually are going to interview at this stage, belatedly, and also discuss what questions to ask in those interviews. So the actual interviews, as we understand it, will happen next week. And they want to make an appointment by the 26th. So 2 other really quick things. Please do not dissolve our search committee until the hiring decision is finalized, because things keep changing and it ain't over till it's over. And finally, I want to thank Nathan Mizell, who made a very passionate, excellent public comment at the regular city council meeting about how the PAB is being not respected, overlooked, passed by, not getting to play the role it's supposed to. And he really put it to the mayor and council about that problem. So thank you, Nathan, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Next up, I believe we have Ms. Saganor.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start where your previous speaker left off by appreciating the comments that Vice Chair Mizell made at the council meeting last night. They were all very much on the mark. And in fact, I think if the council had been really using the PAB as they should, they would have saved themselves a lot of time and really trouble. They danced around how to replace the language on reasonable suspicion for quite some time before they, I think, finally concluded they really couldn't come up with other language that would do something sort of like it, but not quite. So I'm sorry. I'm glad that they finally came to that decision, but the whole thing that they did last night would have been much improved if you guys had been more involved. Thank you very much. For tonight, I would like to suggest that you actually switch the order of your agenda and take the controlled equipment issue earlier in the meeting. I see you have allotted half an hour to it. I think you may want more. And I believe there's a real time crunch on getting that one out to council. Even though the regulations is really important to me, it's probably not as crucial time-wise and could be taken up a little later in the meeting. And in terms of the controlled equipment issues, there are a number of things that I would like to see. I'm just going to talk about one of those, and that has to do with the use of rifles in recruitment, public relations, or promotional activities. And by use, I don't mean uses of force of shooting them, but using them in terms of having them on display, putting them out so that people can look at them, picturing them in recruitment brochures or things, the uses of that sort. And now it has been, and the reason I want to particularly bring this to your attention, of course, is that, you know, we're suffering an endemic of violence with people who get excited by guns, want to buy, want to own assault and sniper rifles and things of that nature, do in fact, especially young men, acquiring such things, having no constructive use for them and using them destructively to shoot other people or themselves. So anything that encourages excitement about assault and sniper rifles seems to me to be not good, not in the public good at this point. And I think it would be wonderful if the police department would take a lead in saying we're not going to use them for promoting. We're not going to recruit people who are excited about guns. We're not going to put them out in public. Now, it has been pointed out to me that, in fact, such uses are not among the authorized uses. And you might want to just clarify that unauthorized uses are prohibited. And that would simplify both this issue and some of the other issues about how things really should not be used. Thank you so much for taking my comment.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jennifer Tu.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jennifer Tu, and I work for the American Friends Service Committee. And we've been supporting communities across California in implementing AB 481, including sharing our expertise in the subcommittee. So I'd like to follow Ms. Sagnor and in what she said. I agree with everything that she said and appreciate how much she's laid it out. And I just want to encourage all of you tonight when you get to that agenda item, which I do hope you'll consider moving a little bit earlier to give it more thorough consideration, that you do pay special attention to the assault rifles policy. Like the previous speaker said, AB 481 does require that for each piece of equipment that's covered in a military equipment use policy, that needs to include what authorized uses are for that equipment. And so this isn't just about whether the weapon is fired. This is whether it is used, which means whether it's deployed, whether it's taken out, whether it is displayed, whether it's carried around. Assault rifles they're deadly weapons, and we need to see more guidance on when use should be prohibited. At the very least, assault rifles should be prohibited from use in public relations activities or in recruitment activities. So please do think about this, and I encourage you to recommend to City Council that the policy be amended to give that guidance on prohibited use of assault rifles. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have, actually, are we done? I thought we had one more person.
Yes. Carolyn Carr.
Oh, and then also Wendy Elf. Miss Carolyn Carr.
Carolyn Scar, S-C-A-R-R. I've lived in Berkeley almost all my life, and I'm astonished that
I can't hear.
Yeah, Miss Carr, we're having trouble hearing you.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Better.
Okay, that's trouble with these microphones that stick up around your ears. My name is Carolyn Scar, S-C-A-R-R. I live on Ada Street in Berkeley, and I live not too far from what used to be Jefferson School. I'll figure out what it's called these days pretty soon. But anyway, I am firmly opposed to the invasion of any assault rifles or that sort of equipment into my city at all for any purpose. Those things are dangerous, as we have obviously seen, and we do not need to have them floating around. They have no hunting use. They have no crowd control use. I organize demonstrations and I work with the police quite closely on a regular basis, and I know that they don't require that kind of equipment in order to serve the community. So I strongly encourage the city to refuse to accept any gifts or even that you have to pay for. I received an information about this meeting this evening from a member of my church, and I am happy that Rachel was able to reach me, and so, you know, when we heard from a surprise announcement that the city was going to purchase a troop carrier, my city council member was very much surprised, having not known about that before. I hope that my city council person is staying on top of these issues, and I hope that she is listening to us, the people who do not want these things. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next we have Wendy Alfson.
Yes, thank you. I'm with the Racial Justice Action Team, and several community members submitted a letter on this subject, which we draw to your attention. I wanted to echo the sentiments of the prior speakers, and especially urge you to adopt the subcommittee recommendations, and particularly that the authorized use section for each type of equipment state that authorized use must comply with federal, state, and local laws and Berkeley PD policy 300, use of force, 303, control devices, and policy 428, First Amendment assemblies. In the rifle section, those specific policies were also carried out. The police department requests this be moved just to legal and procedural rules. And on behalf of the community, I wanted to suggest the opposite, that as a community member, we look under the piece of equipment to see what's authorized. And having some non-descriptive sentence there wasn't helpful. We wouldn't necessarily know to look down to legal and procedural rules to be guided to see policy 303, and that we don't then know that that has anything to do with authorized uses. So I think it is important to retain this limitation in that actual under authorized uses, and a request that the policy number and the name of the policy be written out there. If in the efficiency argument for, if they don't want to repeat that under legal and procedural rules, then since we don't have any that aren't these policies, just to there it could say see authorized uses above. I think the purpose of this policy, along with guiding the officers and guiding the PAB's review of complaints and compliance, is that the community be able to find out what the law enforcement is authorized to do and isn't authorized to do. And greater specification wherever we can will be helpful. I really appreciate all the work that you've done under unfair and unnecessary timelines. We really had till the end of October for you to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It doesn't look like we have anybody else from what I can tell. Would anyone else like to speak? Raise your hand. It doesn't appear to be. You have an opportunity at the end as well. Okay. Let me stop sharing. Here we go. Because on to the next agenda item with approval of minutes. We actually have two different meetings, the 22nd and the 29th. To check in with everybody and see if there are any comments or questions or corrections on the minutes. Let's start with June 22nd. I'm not hearing or seeing any. Give you another second to kind of peruse that. While you're doing that, also please check out June 29th, 2022 for any changes or comments. Any edits? I'm not hearing or seeing any. So we start with June 22nd. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Levine. Can someone second that?
I'll second.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Leftwich. Any objections? Not seeing or hearing any, so moved. How about for June 29th? Can someone move to approve the minutes for the special meeting?
So moved.
I'll second.
Great. Board Member Moore and then Board Member Leftwich. Any objections? Not hearing or seeing any, so moved, approved for both meetings. All right. So Chair and board members report. So I don't have really much to say. I want to thank the service of Director Lee. Folks might recall that she is retiring after 33 years at the City of Berkeley.
I have one more meeting, Chair.
Yes, she does have one more meeting. We're trying to get ourselves ready because it's going to be hard.
Are you getting psychologically prepared?
Yes,
Okay.
we're trying to get everybody emotionally and psychologically prepared for this. We have spent so much time with Kathy and her work and her dedication to the Police Accountability Board and previously at the Police Review Commission have been quite incredible. And I've seen her work so hard and as chair and as vice chair, day and night. I'm sure she's had many sleepless nights, and the work product that she's put out has been quite incredible. It's been a pleasure for me to sign off on things with letter signatures that really were drafted by Kathy. So, I am going to be very sad to see her to go, but also I know that she's put in so much time with the city and also the board and the PRC, and she really has earned her time. But I want to thank her. You know, this is the penultimate meeting before the last meeting, and really want to show her appreciation and signal that she will be greatly missed. And I'm hoping that even after she retires, we'll still be able to have her ear and, you know, have coffee or lunch and catch up on things and probably ask her questions or help, which I'm sure we'll need. I see that Board Member Mizell has his hand up.
Yes, Chair. I will be taking my comments a different direction, but as Director knows, we spoke earlier today. I am quite thankful for all she has done, and I'll save the longer thank you for our last meeting. But I did want to briefly address my comments last night. First, it's small apology to the board. I forgot to say I was speaking as an individual because I was quite pissed off, frankly. So I should have said that. I obviously was not speaking in my capacity as vice chair at that moment, but just clarifying that for you and the public. You know, I think it's important, you know, to clarify some things. I'm very well aware of how the Berkeley city government is structured. I believe most council members, the mayor would agree I do know these things. I mentioned that only insofar as I believe there may be some thought that my anger was about the city council being able to make decisions and us not having those powers. That's never our place. I know we're not city council. We don't get to make those decisions. They have the power to act on the wide purview of things. We have the power to advise and recommend. I've understood that. I've served on multiple city commissions. I've chaired the city's whole public safety reimagining task force. I understand how these things work in the city. What I can't simply be quiet about, and what really angered me, is how the actual process of things has been taking place in the city. It was back at our May 11th meeting when the chief spoke and asked her some basic questions about, for one, when it came to the controlled equipment ordinance, whether the department would allow us to, whether she'd invite Capital Larry to review the policy with us. And she told us at that May 11th meeting that we could go over anything that had been brought over to us from council. And then when we had the meetings, as Board Member Moore can attest to, the department threatened to leave the meeting if we didn't go in the order of operations they want. That's a procedural issue. The chief lied to us. If not, the chief has no control over her own top brass. Either way, it's extremely concerning. That same meeting, May 11th, I believe it was Board Member Ramsey, just invoking your name because the facts, you asked her about, asked the chief about whether or not, and I can get the exact quotes here, whether or not the department had changed its position on the policy that council has now revised last night. The chief said no. The chief said that the chief just asked subject matter experts in the department, that it's not her role to have a position. And yet she also implies that said at that same meeting that she listens to subject matter experts and then tells that to city council members. But we as a board have never heard from these subject matter experts about issues with the policy. So as a board, we can be lied to our face, and no, not even an apology will be offered. As a board, we can be told one thing about the policy, have certain members of the department talk about that policy, but never bring up any concerns to the supposed accountability board that's supposed to be monitoring how policies in the department work. And then, yes, I was also frustrated last night about City Council's decision to introduce the supplemental. To my knowledge, 2 minutes before they made the, or 3 to 5 minutes before they made the decision, which none of us had any ability to review. No one at this board had any ability to comment on, even opine beyond my 60 seconds. Perhaps other board members were in attendance. And yes, the City Council had the power to do that too, but they also had the power to give us the opportunity to speak to it. They also had the power to invite us and give us 5 minutes to actually clear the record, which was not clear last night to my knowledge, about how a policy that the department decided they agreed with, let me rephrase that the department brought to us because they said they couldn't implement the version of the policy that was just passed last night, only a year and a half ago. Now that policy has passed through, and the board, and specifically Board Member Calavita, is being blamed for making our city less safe. But council reminded us one thing last night. We're an advisory body. We don't get to make the final decisions. I know everyone here knows that. I just want to make sure the public's clear on that too. How can the board be blamed for a policy that the department said, this is the policy we want, that the city council then passed, but now it's the board's fault? But when the board attempts to ask, excuse me, let me not speak for the board. When we attempt to ask questions, that's just folks, individuals, about those same things, now we've stepped too far out of the line. Now we're pushing too hard. No. There's things above the police department and the city council in the city's organizational chart. It's the people of Berkeley. And the people of Berkeley voted 83% to have strong police oversight in this city. That doesn't take place if the chief can lie to us directly. That doesn't take place if we have no seat at the table in council discussions. Yes, they get to make the decision. I am not disagreeing. Yes, the department gets to make certain decisions. I'm not disagreeing with the decisions that are within their legal purview. I have over and over honored legal precedent in terms of who gets to make what decision. But when it's clearly we should have a role in something, clearly we should be able to get the truth out of something. We do not as a board. We haven't been able to as of recently. And I fear we are in the position of becoming irrelevant fast. So I don't want to grandstand. I wanted to make that very clear as to what my issue is. It's a procedural justice issue. How you do things matters, and how things are done affects what accountability looks like in this city. Right now, on a lot of matters, it does not look good. And I hope once we get the subpoena power cleaned up and nailed out, we can get some straight answers from a lot of folks in the city. Not because I'm looking to push some agenda, not because of whatever I may be accused of, because we as a board need to have straight answers if we're going to do any type of actual oversight. It's just a fact. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think your remarks kind of remind you had raised an issue with regard to some of the blaming of board members. So I want to just make a really specific statement with that regard. With regard to procedural justice, I think that is, you are correct. That's the absolute mission and the value of a police oversight, civilian-based police oversight board, such as the Police Accountability Board. I can vouch for all the members here in terms of their professionalism in the various subcommittees that I sat upon, in particular with reference to the particular board member that you're referring to, who was recently referenced in a news piece, an opinion piece. There are First Amendment protections. Of course, anyone can have their opinion. I do want to remind folks that this is a very dedicated group of folks here, many of whom have legal backgrounds, and that there's a lot of process that goes through the review of the various procedures that apply to law enforcement in the city. And I think it's a fair and transparent process. And I am a law enforcement officer as a federal government attorney, and I've been a state level law enforcement officer as a state level attorney as well. And all my experiences in our subcommittees and our general meetings, what I've seen is a lot of process and a lot of fair process and transparency. So I want to vouch for everybody that's here putting in all of this hard work, and the folks who are engaged with bringing community policing and fair and transparent policing to the city of Berkeley. That, it is hard work, and sometimes people will be singled out in the press, and it's often not fair. But I know that you guys are doing the hard work, and I think other people do too. And so please continue doing so. And I know that sometimes it can be frustrating, and it can demotivate in some ways to be singled out or to have the type of challenges that we are having right now. But you wouldn't have these type of challenges if it wasn't important work. It's not going to be easy. So thanks so much for your continuing efforts, and I hope folks continue to stay engaged and continue to work with the board, and board members continue to view this as a very important service, but also that it's a service that hopefully brings satisfaction to them too in their engagement. So thanks again, and thank you, Vice Chair Mizell, for raising your concerns. Are there other board members who would like to raise or make a comment? Okay, not hearing nor seeing any. I'd like to move on to Director Lee's report.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on the most recent comments, I did put all the latest supplemental material from council had them posted as supplemental information for our meeting here tonight. In case you were, I had forwarded you all the links, but they're all there in one place if you want to take a look at them. There has been one new case filed, one new complaint filed since your last meeting, And I think I mentioned at our last meeting that we'll be, Investigator Thomas and I will be bringing 2 findings and recommendations to you for your July 27th meeting. I had forgotten to mention that the chair and I will be participating in an oversight and public safety roundtable, and that's coming up on Friday. This has been convened by the mayor, and the participants will include the mayor, the police chief, the city manager, I think the city attorney, your chair, myself, and the president of the Berkeley Police Association. So this is an effort to get all the stakeholders on board and see about trying to make things go more smoothly. And I think everybody is committed to the same goals, but the way we're getting there hasn't, I think we need to sort out better. And I believe it's conceived as a quarterly meeting of all those parties that I had mentioned. So again, the first meeting has been scheduled for Friday. And I will be doing it long distance because when I said I was available, I forgot I would be gone. And so I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow afternoon and Friday. I'm back on Monday. National Night Out is coming up on August 2nd, and some of you may be familiar with that. It's a night for neighborhood groups to come together, and I see that the registration is open now. It's posted up on the police department's website. So last year, board member Owens and I went around, and it was a little challenging because of COVID and things got outright canceled. We were looking for neighborhood gatherings and they just weren't there. So it's a night where the police department also goes out and does some, community outreach, and it's an opportunity for us to do that too. So I'm not, I don't really have time to get there organized before I go. So I leave it to you. I'll bring it up. I'll remind you about it at your next meeting. By then, there should be a map available of the various neighborhood gatherings that you might want to go visit and introduce yourselves and talk about the PAB and the work that it does. So it's an opportunity to get the word out about what we do. And then, I wanted to mention, I wanted to put this idea in your head and actually agendize it for the next meeting, which is the NACO conference falls on a time when you're scheduled for your first meeting in September. So I want you to think about having a special meeting September 7th instead of September 13th, because your director, and I hope you have a director, will probably be at NACO, and Ms. Thomas would like to attend as well as possibly a couple board members, and that is coming up later in the agenda. So I just want to put that idea in your head. And last, there's a stray piece of paper in your packet. It's on page 61. It ended up in the middle of controlled equipment, but it's the announcement about the webinar on body-worn camera video that was put on by NACO. And I know that Ms. Thomas and at least 2 of our board members attended that webinar, and I heard that it was quite good. So that was just there as an FYI. That is all I have, and I see several raised hands. Board member, Vice Chair Mizell.
Thank you, Director Lee. Just ask about that roundtable. I'd like to participate if possible. I'm not sure who in the city is running the meeting, but I hope that's an invitation that can be extended, considering my time on this board and most other
Mhm.
public safety related things with the police department in this city?
That would be the mayor's office.
Okay, I can, will you
You
provide
can
send an
do that.
email or?
Yeah, well, why don't you do that? Because I'm going to be gone
Okay,
in the afternoon tomorrow, by the afternoon tomorrow.
okay.
would
Can
be
you forward
helpful.
me just the basic information about the meeting timing?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Leftwich?
My question was also about that roundtable.
Uh-huh.
I'm pleased to hear that that's happening since we have been struggling with those relationships.
Right.
So I assume it's not public then? I'm wondering because it's not public.
No.
I'm wondering how it's structured and whose idea it was, how it came about.
I believe it was the mayor and the city manager. And, you know, I've been thinking about I think several people sort of thought about it and sort of coalesced into what it is. So
And you know how it's going to be structured, the meeting?
How it's going to be structured? I think there's going to be an opportunity for everybody to talk about what their concerns are in terms of oversight being effective and how all these relationships are working or not working. So, and a chance, I think one reason it's not going to be public is for a chance for people to speak frankly. I believe that I don't know how much how much of the conversation will be made public. I think everybody understands that sometimes in order to make progress, sometimes you have to have frank discussions, and sometimes you can't have those frank discussions if they're not going to be confidential. People need to feel that they're in a safe space. And I do hope that, I mean, I think obviously what comes out of it eventually down the road will be something that's public or at least manifested publicly. I think the end goal is to have everybody talking and communicating better. I mean, right now, you know, we don't have something. I think that is a big item for the board is greater participation of the union in all of our meetings and policy reviews and things like that. They probably have things to say about the board. So
yes, I would just hope that you and our chair would convey that how different the tone is than under the PRC, that this is quite a change. And I've heard that it's new union leadership, perhaps a change of leadership in the department, but that, you know, having served on both, and I know I share this feeling with other board members, that it's just been quite different. The tone has been much more combative, and that's been disappointing. The second question I had, you said, if, you know, hopefully we'll have a director by then. What happens if when you retire, no new director has been hired?
Well, that's an excellent question. Well, first of all, I am hearing, and this is consistent with what Ms. Palatnik said, that council will be appointing somebody at its July 26th meeting. They know they have to do that because they want to do it before their break. I mean, it has to be, it's the council who makes the appointment and they have to do it at a meeting. You know, I think the next question is, when will that person be available to start working? And one thing I'm trying to do, I'm having one of my regular meetings with the head of HR, if not tomorrow, then early next week. And I want to talk about how that gap can be filled in the meantime. So it's an excellent question, and I don't have the answer to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Board Member Mizell, is that your hand left over or you have a new question?
Sorry, leftover.
Okay, no problem. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you very much. And next we have the Chief of Police's report.
Yeah, the chief's out of town. I'll keep it brief in the interest of time, but just want to let you know that we had our first meeting today with Councilmember Taplin, starting up some early discussions about ceasefire. So some that's underway coming out of the reimagining process. Just let you know that that's started happening. That's all I have for a minute.
Thank you, Lieutenant Montgomery, for joining and providing the Chief of Police's report. And on to the next agenda item, item 8, with subcommittee reports. Fair and impartial policing implementation.
The Board Member Calavita is the chair, and I know that she wanted to schedule a meeting, but she's been out of town, so that hasn't happened. So I would say no report because they haven't met.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna take a break, and Vice Chair Mizell will act.
Thank you, Chair. Going to item 8B, the Director Search. We have here considered dissolving subcommittee. Let me go to Board Member Lee and Board Member Moore on your thoughts on that. I know we heard public members have some concerns about that.
Yeah, can I speak to this?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, I'm not happy. A lot of what I have to say echoes what Vice Chair Mizell has already said, and apparently said yesterday. I didn't hear it, I wasn't there. I wrote an email to LaTanya Bello on July 8th. I was concerned about the status of the director hiring. Board Member Moore and I spent an entire day interviewing 6 candidates. And after this, and we made recommendations. And I know he didn't want me to say last time, but I'm going to say we made clear recommendations that were consistent with the other panel. There were 2 panels. We made 3 recommendations. They were unanimously agreed upon as they were in the second panel. So we have uniform and strong views. I wanted to find out what the status of the city council's role was, because I was approached with the request from city council members that they didn't know who the 6 candidates were. And I said, well, I had to sign a confidentiality declaration, but this is odd because the city council is higher and makes the ultimate decision, and I'm here just to recommend. How can I have information that I can't communicate to them? So I wrote to Ms. Bello because the city manager has been running this entire program. Ms. Polotnik is correct. I didn't know about what transpired yesterday, but I've been making clear efforts as the director of this subcommittee to get this information. The response was an automatic one on July 8th when I asked for an update. I said I had been requested by city council members for these 6 candidates and information about it, and I wanted to know what the status was. I got an automatic reply that Ms. Bello was out of the office until the 12th. So on the 12th, I wrote again, and I did get a reply from her. I'm going to read you my very short request, and it just started with a couple of niceties I'll leave out related to her time off. And as I've said in the past, she's been forthcoming and very cordial. But I said there's some confusion about whether council members have received as much information as the DPA panel interviewers, like me. I have been requested to provide to council members information about the 6 finalists we interviewed. This surprised me since they were to have been the ones to make that selection and of course have greater authority in this process than the PAB, who are only advisors to council members. I look forward to clarification from you before our PAB meeting tomorrow, which is this meeting. I got a reply from her, which I was baffled by. Her reply, in addition to the niceties after that, was, as it relates to the question below, that's what I just read you, you should not need to provide anything, as staff will be handling the communication to council in addition to sharing of information and responding to their questions. I had no idea what that meant. Having heard now from Ms. Polotnik, we haven't met. There wasn't a reason to, there wasn't any task for us to discuss or to accomplish. There was information that was being withheld, and I guess I was one of the people in the dark, even more than our public member who was locked out of the interview process, but who has apparently quite an extensive network in the community. So, thank you, Ms. Polotnik, for informing us. I'm very strong in my view we should not dissolve this, and that was my intention even before hearing Ms. Polotnik. I want to get to the bottom of this. I'm concerned about whether the day that Board Member Moore and I spent making recommendations that were not ours alone, that were quite universally consistent with a large group of people, insiders and out, that voice is still going to be part of this process. I don't know if it is. We're going back to 6, then to 10. I have no idea what 3 the city council will be given by the city manager, which is what's in the charter. So the contract wasn't followed. The charter implies clearly what our role is as guidance to the council members. I hope our voice can continue to be heard. I'll do the best I can to ask questions and get answers. But I agree with Vice Chair Mizell. There's a problem. It's been apparent to me for quite a while, and it makes me feel very resentful that I want so much to provide my time and my expertise. I have experience in this area to share, but it seems as though this board, I mean, for example, I had my hand up on what Director Lee said is happening this Friday. Is this the roundtable I'm hearing has been convened? It's for discussion about the PAB. And yes, I hope that Vice Chairman Mizell will be there. But, you know, it would have been nice to have the PAB's voice be heard at least by someone. And I assume Chair Chang will voice our concerns. But, you know, to have him hear directly from us questions that we'd like to ask and answered before he goes would be nice. And it's too late to do that. That's clear. So there's problems and concerns, and I'm complaining, and I think it's legitimate. I will continue to make efforts to gather information and to share them with the rest of the board and my subcommittee. But I was absolutely door shut in my face. And so I don't want to waste people's time saying, this is what I did, and I got nowhere. But I'm saying it here because it's instructive in terms of what happens in this roundtable. Thank you. Don't dissolve this yet, please.
Thank you for the very important comments, Board Member Levine. I'm sorry, Director Lee, did you have something?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I agendized the possible dissolution because I didn't know what was happening. So
Oh, that's a running theme today.
Yeah, well, we're all in the dark, so that's that's not good. It's not good, and it marginalizes community members as myself and the other 8 here. That's we're spending some time here. I don't like staying up till 11 at these meetings, and I've complained about it. But I'm offering something. If it's not wanted, then what's the point? It's really quite insulting, actually. Now I'll shut up.
Thank you for that. So yeah, unless board members have objections, we can certainly keep the subcommittee going. Okay, seeing none, I think we can go ahead and proceed there to item 8C, which is the regulation subcommittee. Chair.
Yes, hello, thank you so much. Thank you for acting. Before we go on to AC, I want to ask a quick question of the director in terms of process. Is it possible at this point to have a conversation during this meeting with an amendment of the agenda about the upcoming roundtable to get feedback from other board members?
No, it hasn't been agendized.
Okay, so it cannot be done. Is there a way we can recommend them to send emails to like you and I? Before, it is a short time frame, I know, but it is today's Wednesday and the meeting's on Friday to provide feedback in terms of
I guess individually. So first of all, this is a convenient time for me to recognize that Deputy City Attorney Iris Mattis is here, and she's been on the meeting for some time.
Thank you.
And so it is my belief, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, it's my belief that individual board members can certainly submit their feedback to you and I, but we can't share it with them.
With the entire board,
right?
But they can, like, right. If one sends it to you, though, Director Lee.
Yeah, they could send it to me or to you, but there should be no further.
Can they
discussion.
send it? Yeah, and can they send it to both you and I, CC, at the same time?
I think so.
But there's a we do have some time. It's on Friday afternoon. Mid-afternoon is a meeting at 2:00. So you could please, lacking another method right now of modifying the agenda, please feel free to send us an email. You can CC the two of us, or if you want, you can send it to us separately. But it's also okay, Director Lee, if they send you something separately, you would be able to forward it to me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then both, at least the two of us would be informed. And in the meantime, Vice Chair Mizell is going to find out if he will be able to attend, and we sent him the time frame of it already, and some information. And then if that's the case, Director Lee, in terms of informing Vice Chair Mizell of the comments from other board members, would that be okay as well if we were forward then to Vice Chair Mizell any feedback? I'm wondering if that starts to get into the.
Now it's getting a little tricky.
Yeah.
Board Member Ramsey had his hand up, but now it's not up. And Ms. Mattis, if you're listening, if you have any guidance for us, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, if something was sent first to board member myself or to Director Lee, and then if Vice Chair Mizell was able to come to the meeting, we'd want to keep him abreast, and then we pinged him the feedback from our fellow board members. Would that be if Deputy? I see you're off mute, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
We can.
I have to look into it. So I think Director Lee's correct in that individual communications can be appropriate, but if those individual communications are forwarded such that it creates essentially communication between, a majority of the board, then I think that's would be inappropriate. But I'd have to just double check. I can confirm, since this communication, at least at first, is going to be sent to just Director Lee, and it sounds like potentially you, Chair Chang. I think that should be okay. And then I can just confirm, how far that can be further forwarded and get back to Director Lee on that.
Okay. And if it's, let's say if it's forwarded, but it's not an interactive communication, but it's as a communique in terms of board member X said this, sent it to Director Lee and Chair Chang, and then we forward the communique with no commentary or interactivity, just forward to that same email. If you could look into that potential distinction as well, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. But regardless, Vice Chair Mizell, if we don't get information in time, or there's concern about the Brown Act, then, and if you go to the meeting, we'll be providing those feedback in the most relevant form there, and you will hear it there in a meeting.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, Chair. And yeah, I mean, the mayor will have my email in the next 20 minutes. So yeah, we'll see. But I fully appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. And Board Member Ramsey, I think you had your hand up and we were still talking.
I was premature. I was going to ask to make a change to the agenda, but I'll wait until the committee reports are done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So let's, are there any other questions about that? If there are not, this is an important issue. It's about transparency and the functioning of the board as a oversight entity. So I do want to make sure if any other board members have concerns about this roundtable that's coming up or having their voice heard, please speak up now. But also in the meantime, in terms of feedback, you are of course open to send, and you should, hopefully every single one of you will send an email to both Director Lee and myself together or separately, if you feel comfortable either way. So I'm not seeing or hearing any other comments. So let's drop back into 8C, and right now it's 8:03 in terms of a time check. So Regulations Subcommittee, again, item 9A below, old business, continuing reviewing the draft of proposed permanent regulations for handling investigations and complaints. Should we pull up the electronic version? Dr. Lee, what do you think?
No, Chair, it's just a reference to when we get there. So there's really no report out from Regulations Subcommittee.
I got a little confused.
And the same is true for controlled equipment.
That's right. There's no really report out what we've been working on, as you guys all know, in the public meetings. And when we get there, we'll continue reviewing. C is the same, D is the same thing, C item 10B. And the PAB budget subcommittee.
The director can address this, but my understanding is the 2 additional positions that we requested were approved. Is that correct?
No. Oh, did I not report? I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't. The 1 additional analyst position was approved, and that was sort of as predicted based on what had happened in the budget committee of the council. And so I'm pretty sure I had let you know that the analyst was in tier 1 and that the investigator was in tier 2. And the recommendation from the budget committee was to fund everything in tier 1. And then there were some things that moved around, but they didn't, nothing at the council level, at the full council level. But that did not include moving the a second investigator to tier 1. Our request for the analyst, for a consultant to lead the board through a strategic planning process is in there, as well as funds for a consultant to do a performance evaluation of your permanent director, which would be the next fiscal year. The strategic planning person would be for the current fiscal year. But the $50,000 for policy review got cut. So of all the big items.
So the analyst that was approved, which one was it? Because we asked
That's
for a budget.
analyst number 2. So that's your data analyst.
Okay, that was approved or cut?
That was approved.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's 5 positions: the director, the investigator, your admin support, which is what we have now, a policy person. I'm in the process of changing that old PRC officer to a policy person. And then your second policy person is number 5.
Is the second?
The second one is a analyst, a data analyst, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You said the
I'm
second.
sorry. I meant to say analyst, not policy.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
Right. The city manager's thinking, which she had expressed to the budget committee, was that if there is need for more investigatory work, that could be, we could hire somebody on a temporary basis for that purpose, or hire a contract that out, in other words. So that's what happened with the budget, and I apologize for forgetting to report on that. So since the budget's been approved, and unlike the director search issues, there's nothing more to be done. That's why I suggested dissolving the subcommittee. So if people agree, somebody could make a motion.
I agree, and I'd make a motion.
Thank you.
So I was on that subcommittee too.
Does someone want a second? I heard somebody. Oh, sorry. Is that Board Member Harris?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Harris has seconded. Are there any objections? Neither seeing nor hear any, so moved. Okay, great. And we're down to 9, old business, the regs. Shall we pull up where we were at on that?
Board Member Ramsey has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, it's Board Member Ramsey.
I was gonna move to 9C to the bottom of items in 10. So can we do it after we do the 3 items in 10?
Oh, that's right. That came from a suggestion from the public as well. I think that makes sense because the controlled equipment 10C has a time frame on it. Yeah. So your recommendation is to move 9A down to after 9.
After 10C. So just to do all of the 10 items.
Okay.
10 items and then come back to 9.
And in terms of the 10 items, do we want to drop C up to the top of 10 as 10A versus?
I don't think it matters. The other ones are pretty quick administrative stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there a motion for this?
He just made a motion.
So you officially have moved for this. I apologize. Not just an idea. He's moved. And then can someone second? I think was that Board Member?
I second it.
Okay, so moved. So 9 is dropped down to the after 10. Okay, great. So
can you just make sure everybody agrees to that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Is there any, I don't see or hear any objections. Are there objections to flipping that agenda item down in order to get to the 10s? I'm not seeing nor hearing any. Therefore, motion so moved. Okay, great. So we're down to 10A now. Transition to permanent director of police accountability. Interim director is scheduled until retirement.
This is Board Member Owen's item, so maybe if she wants to lead it off.
Yeah, I just had questions related to, you had told us last time you were going to be working part-time. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if you weren't in the office, does that mean we reach out to the investigator if we need something? I just didn't know how that transition worked. And I also now have questions about the 3 open positions. Are you starting at least the beginning process with HR on those, so at least there's something in the works. I mean, I know it's going to be early something, but something in the works. So I'm just trying to understand how this is going to work, because we as a board clearly continue to operate. So that was just my question.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to tackle those questions. In terms of my schedule, I've been in the office, and realistically, and I knew this, I might not be able to cut back as much as I wanted. And so I've been working 7 hours a day. So almost full time. In terms of the recruitments, those one of the things I am trying to do is to get those going. And one of them, just the changing that PRC officer position to the policy analyst position is just, there's just a lot of bureaucracy that's very frustrating for me. And so it takes time, and HR is still understaffed as they have been for a while. So it's basically a lot of paperwork, and technically it's not paperwork because a lot of it is online now. So that's better. So there is a whole program for initiating and then following through on the whole recruitment and hiring process. Again, one of the important things to do on my list before I retire is to get all those going. I want to get the first analyst and the permanent investigator recruitments going. The permanent investigator recruitment shouldn't be that difficult because that job classification exists, and we recently did a recruitment for our temporary investigator, and so that shouldn't be too difficult. Did I answer all your questions? I felt like there's more.
I mean, well, I guess this really isn't a question. I guess it's really just a comment. Kind of related to the fact that if you have your last day, right? July
29th.
Yeah. So clearly there's not going to be overlap between you and the new director.
That's correct.
No, not even, even a day, you know what I'm saying?
No, yes, you're right. You're right. And so just so everybody knows, so there are a couple things going on. One is, of course, I'm trying to document as well as I can everything that has been going on so that the next person can pick up a folder and know what the, excuse me, and know what the status on a particular policy issue is, right? I mean, I think we have the investigations covered because we do have Ms. Thomas and she's on top of everything. So, and then, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I know I started out by saying, oh, the other thing is I will make myself available to board members, to the new director, as needed. I'm not going to disappear into a black hole because, I believe in this work, and I'm willing to ensure that my successor is able to pick up the reins. And so I'm happy to, help that person out. Of course, I'm trying to get as much done in advance so that various projects and tasks can be picked up without having to pick up the phone and call me. But again, I will make myself available to that person. I'm not going anywhere. I am taking a trip in September, but I mean, I'll be here and available. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. In terms of the transition, to make it as smooth as possible from a chair perspective, Director Lee has provided me with kind of a hit list of what's in process and needs to be done.
Yes, next, at your next meeting, I'll have a list of all your pending and then, all your pending tasks, whether they're in progress or have been sort of sitting, waiting for more bodies and more bandwidth on the board's part.
Thank you.
Board Member Owens?
What about, we have several questions, concerns that have been forwarded on to the city attorney's office. What's going on with that? And how does that transition potentially if we don't have any answers back before you're gone?
Well, whether or not I'm here, those still need to get answered. And so one file for sure will be a list of pending questions pending before the city attorney's office. So, I mean, just because I'm gone doesn't mean that the advice isn't needed. And
I totally understand.
And you know, I'm confident that the city attorney's office understands that.
So then that leads me to another question, and then I'll stop because we got a lot on our calendar. But so if the city attorney's office comes up with an answer, we're dark in August, like the council.
Mm-hmm.
If they come up with an answer, will we get it or we not get it until we have our first meeting?
Well, depending on what it has to do with. So there are some questions outstanding that have to do with, that affect Ms. Thomas's work. So I would assume those would go to her. And for other questions, I think that is tied up into, is there going to be a person or somebody who's going to bridge this gap, right? So it can't be somebody called the director, because that director has to be appointed by the council. So so what I want to find out from HR is, can there be a temporary somebody who, you know, is in a position to sort of handle these types of matters that you just raised, for instance, to be a liaison to the board for things that might come up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on 10A in the transition? Not hearing or seeing any. Let's move on to the NACOL annual conference, which is September 11th to the 15th in Fort Worth.
So let me just start by asking, is there anybody who's decided there? Well, first let me ask the chair, who I think you told me maybe. And then after the chair, is there any change in that status, Chair?
No, but you know, where I was looking at the number of days, I think I
Right.
could go, but not for necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. So you'd recommended there were a number of days that you thought would make sense to be there.
Well, at a minimum 3, maybe 4, if you could stretch it.
Yeah. And it's arrival on a Sunday on the 11th. And do you know if they have actual panels on the 11th?
There are, let's see, the schedule is in your packet on page 43.
Just for that, you already have it in here. So
there are some panels. They're not necessarily as substantive as the rest of the day. There's trauma and wellness and oversight, wellness activities, navigating my region. I think that has to do with maybe getting together with, like for us, would be people from California.
Yeah.
And then there's an opening reception.
okay.
So that's
Yep.
that.
Okay, that makes sense. So I think we'd probably arrive later on Sunday, and then it looks like spend the first, Monday through Wednesday, probably Monday,
Mhm.
Monday through Wednesday.
If you did that, I think it would be worth your while and worth the expense of the city sending you.
Okay. And Thursday, there's like a general session.
Well, there's
Sure.
2 general sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people do leave on
And
Wednesday. Although Wednesday, there's a reception. So, I mean, that's not substantive.
Sure.
So,
yeah, that's an important one to engage with folks. But on Thursday, would any of these panels that folks miss, they then be able to have access to it by video recording, so long as
they have not done that in the past, so I don't know.
okay.
And let me also mention there's a virtual conference that's going to be held on 3 successive Wednesdays in October through November. And I didn't include that because I just wanted to focus on this. So just to keep that in mind for people.
Okay.
3 days of virtual programming.
A different a set of
Different topics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna confirm again, but I think it's fine to put me down from like Sunday through
Okay.
Wednesday. That's the 11th through the 14th.
Okay, great. Chair Mizell?
Yeah, I'd like to say I am interested. I know obviously I was very fortunate to go back in 2019, back when I forget what had happened that I managed to be able to go. I think one commissioner had to drop out at the last minute, but that was quite some time ago. And I think I joked with you then, Kathy, that I was the youngest person at the entire conference, and I think I think I'll be close to the youngest person at the entire conference still if I go. But it definitely was a good experience for me in 2019. Very informative. Assuming COVID is not going wild, which is a constant concern at this point, I would be interested in going.
Okay, thank you. Because board member Mizell has gone before, I think if there's anybody else who hasn't attended, who wishes to go, I would give them precedent. But I'm not seeing any other hands, although I thought I saw board member Owen's hand raised for a second.
That was more of a question. I know last year because of COVID, they did, with this conference, they did a video conference. So I didn't know if they were gonna do that with this one, but it sounds like they're not. Like, I didn't know if they were gonna offer the session also as a video, but it doesn't sound like they're gonna do that, right?
I don't think so. So they did have in person last year, but it wasn't, to my knowledge, it wasn't made available afterwards. But they also ran a virtual conference.
Okay, so I thought they were run concurrently, but they were two.
No.
different things. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Board member Harris?
So is there going to be a virtual conference this year or not?
I'm sorry, I can't. Board member Harris, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Is there going to be a virtual conference this year?
A virtual, yes, there will be a virtual conference, and it's different from the last 2 years. They had like for every day for, I don't know, 12 weeks, they had one session, or like 4 days out of 5. This year, what they've set up is full days on 3 Wednesdays, starting in October and through November. And so I believe there should be money in the budget to do that. And I believe the topics are different than the in-person.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in the virtual conference.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, I'm not hearing from anybody else, so we'll get our chair and our vice chair signed up. the one thing I notice is, so it's $570. The registration fee is $575 if you register by July 15th, but there are no refunds. If you register after July 15th, it's $675, but you can get everything but $100 back if you have to cancel. So if there's any possibility, you know, if you think you're really not sure, then maybe we should just sign you up later until you are sure.
Does that include the pandemic issue though? Will they, if there's a concern around, if there's a, you know, increase in the virus, will they allow, do you know if?
I haven't seen that anywhere on the, I haven't seen that anywhere.
And given that concern that's also been voiced by Vice Chair Mizell, I'm wondering if you should wait and just pay the additional cost in case there are medical health concerns about canceling.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean,
all right, maybe we should do it that way, but what you should do is just go ahead and reserve your conference room, hotel room, I'm sorry.
Oh, I see, okay.
Because, so you can get the rate. And last year they did sell out, and a person who is nodding his head knows that, and the city paid, but it paid full freight, so.
Okay. Great, thank you for that. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Cassie. So do we need to do something on our end in terms of the booking, or is it?
Yes, you would go ahead and make that reservation, because that's going to cost you nothing, and you'll have until almost the last, you know.
Okay, and it's the reimbursement process, right?
Well, that's different. Yeah, I mean, no, it doesn't cost you anything to book. So I would like you to do that, to reserve that room at the special conference rate.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. We can move on.
Okay, great. So moving on down to 10C, controlled equipment. So there, Vice Chair Mizell, you had previously raised a request to permit John Lindsay Poland to serve as a panelist.
Yes, I'll make that motion to suspend the rules to allow Mr. Lindsay Poland to participate as a panelist, given any responses to the board's questions.
Is there a second on that motion?
I second it.
Thank you, Board Member Levine. Are there any objections? Not hearing or seeing anything. So Director Lee, can I do this, or can I elevate him to a panelist?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay, on page 45 of your packet is my memo, and 47 is the actual policy itself. And I guess it would make sense for me to share my screen. And I guess I'll just go through the points, and if board members Moore and Ramsey, who are on the controlled equipment subcommittee, would chime in, I encourage you actually to chime in at any point on these. So the first, well, there was just a global thing to delete references to lexical policies, and that there was no problem with that. Then for rifles, there were discussion under authorized uses. There was some language added, and this stemmed from a conversation about how and when and under what circumstances you use the rifle should be spelled out. The department said, well, actually, we already have that. We have, I think they called it a threat matrix. And so the subcommittee decided that it would be good to reference the that specific policy. And it's in policy 607, specifically risk, it's called risk assessment, not threat assessment. And that's beginning on page 83 of your packet is policy 607. He thought he put it under authorized uses, which is what where I thought it belonged. He thought it belonged better under legal and procedural rules. And if either member of the subcommittee remembers, I could use some help here. And Sergeant Ledoux also suggested referencing 607 only, not 607.3, just in case of any change in 607, if there's a renumbering for whatever reason, just to make sure that it continued to be a viable reference. So this would apply for all three of the rifle policies. There's this one and one more. This one. Subcommittee members want to add anything at this point?
Just the only thing I would add is we did agree to leave the 0.3 off, the 607 reference.
We did? Okay.
We did.
Okay, thank you. I didn't, obviously I didn't have that in my notes. Okay. All right, I'll just put a note here to
Mr. Lindsay Poland.
Yes, I can say this after going through the whole thing, but on this particular piece, I would note that policy 607 refers to high-risk operations. That's what it's all about. It has no reference at all to rifles, none. And policy 709, which we're reviewing here, makes no reference to high-risk operations. So it might need something a little bit more explicit in terms of, I mean, this is good, use of this firearm must comply with it, but it's that 607 doesn't say that the rifle would be, it doesn't make any reference to rifles. So I just, that's a little concern, especially since there's no reference to high risk operations, which is what 607 is about in this policy.
Mr. Poland, can I make a comment, maybe the convex of that argument? If the rifle is being used, wouldn't we want to have the police use a risk assessment at that time And that way that if the rifle is authorized under 607, that they have to follow those guidelines because it's a high risk if you're pulling out your rifle.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I'm just saying that the connection might not be as clear because 607 doesn't reference rifles. So I totally agree with you. I mean, I would say that 607 does not reference a number of things that we had proposed be part of those considerations. And this is particularly for pre-planned operations, right? Deployments, not other types of deployments. But maybe this is explicit enough. It's just that because 607 doesn't say that rifles would be deployed, maybe it just means the same considerations as are used in policy 607 should be used in decisions about pre-planned deployment of rifles. Might make the connection more explicit.
Board member Levine, you have your hand raised.
Yes. I have to confess some ignorance here. I looked up deconfliction. I understand that word is particular to policing operations. It's not clear in some of these regulations what the precise meaning of the words being used is. And should I rely on Wikipedia and updated dictionary definitions? Some of this language isn't clear to me. It's not straightforward, and I'm not even sure what is contained in this concept of high-risk operation. So I'm just, how does one conclude whether you fit into anything in particular? Am I missing the definitions? It says definitions here, but it has high-risk operations, but it doesn't have deconfliction. It just has case officer and high-risk operations. I don't know. It's some of this seems unnecessarily obtuse to me, but maybe it's me.
So deconfliction sounds like a term of art, and perhaps just to respond to that quickly, perhaps we should quickly define it, and hearing from Lieutenant Montgomery as well, and then from others, might consider having definitions for words that are terms of art, just to ensure that everybody understands what's going on here when they read this. Because if Board Member Levine, given your experience, if you don't quite understand what that means, I'm sure many other folks would not either.
Well, I did look it up, but I don't want to assume that that's what I should rely on.
Okay, so possibly a definition section here with words like deconfliction, which are very specific.
Chair, section 607.4 explains deconfliction.
Okay, so do we need to pull it up then? 607.4. Oh, I see that. So deconfliction systems are designed to identify persons' locations associated with investigations or law enforcement operations and alert participating agencies and others are planning. So that's a good definition. Now, do you think it's necessary?
It's not, that isn't, but that's my problem. That's not exactly what the definition is. This definition isn't clear. It says designed to identify persons and locations associated with investigations or law enforcement operations. My understanding from looking it up is that this is when there are more than one law enforcement operation that is close in time and proximity of place, and there needs to be coordination. But this implies that these might include demonstrations, for example, or civilian activity that might conflict with police activity, which is not what the definition is in the dictionary. So I don't know.
We have a potential scope question there with
Yeah, there seems, when you use a specific word and then you change the definition, that seems risky to me in a situation like this. I liked what the person in the public comment said, that each item needs to be clearly defined in terms of its risk by use, by deployment, and the language has to be clear, not just for the police, but for the community. I thought that was a very good point. This is an example of something, to me, that's complicated and unclear and conflicts with a dictionary definition. So
a potential suggestion to move that to a definition and to consider the appropriate scope of what is actually capturing and defining, which is going to take a bit of conversation, but kind of mechanical aspect is to just have proper set of definitions here. Right now, there appears to be, unless I'm misreading this, 607.1.1 only has 2 definitions, while at the start of each other subsection, there seems to be some type of mini definition / context. So we should have a conversation about that quickly. And then Board Member Levine, do you have other comments as I move on to John Lindsay Poland? And
no, I completely want to hear from him.
Okay, so we have that on the table about this definition scope issue.
Can I also be heard on this? I mean, I was on the subcommittee.
Yeah, Board Member Ramsey as well. You guys can.
Yeah, I defer to Board Member Ramsey first.
Okay.
Can I just say a couple things? One, that operations planning and deconfliction is just the title. It's the title of policy. So you can just like scratch it out. I mean, it's not. That's the title of policy 607. So as I understood this as we were going through here, for each one of these weapons, there's a purpose and an authorized use. The real authorized use was that it's only supposed to be used in defense of life or great bodily injury or potential violent or victims of violent crimes, general public or officers. That's the authorized use. I think what people wanted in this was something to say, well, hey, if it's a weapon, if it's a rifle, then that's a high risk, sort of weapon, so it should comply with the 607. So we were just putting in comply with 607, just make sure that it's got to comply with that. But these policies are not, we're not going to have every specific policy that applies to the weapon in this particular policy. Like use of force still applies to a weapon. Like we're not going to drop in an independent use of force policy for the rifle and for each rifle. So I mean, that goes without saying. They still have to comply with all the other policies that are in BPD. So this can't be looked at in a vacuum. And so, as I understood it, and I think as Board Member Moore and I, for each one, it's saying its purpose and what the authorized use is. This use is fairly limited. Defense of life and great bodily injury or potential victims. Someone wanted to make it very clear that they also had to comply with the risk assessment that's set forth in 607. So we said, okay, well, put that in there. But that's it. I mean, I wouldn't try to overcomplicate this. I mean, like I said, those words don't mean anything. They're titles.
Well, I think that's helpful. And I think that all extraneous material should be omitted to make it clear. That'll help clarify exactly what you just said.
Here it could just say use the firearm for whatever. Use the firearm must comply with policy 607. Period. They're just making it clear that you know what policy 607 is, which is operations planning and deconfliction.
So just instead of the 607.3 risk assessment, just policy 607. Board member.
I'm fine with keeping operations planning and deconfliction. Maybe put some quotes around it. Okay, it's the title. It's trying to make it clear what policy we're talking about.
Okay.
So the numbers change and so forth. It can get confusing. That's why we didn't want to have 607.3. Policy 607, if you want to make it really clear, put quotations around operations and before one quote, open quote before operations, and one closed quote before deconfliction. And maybe that'll make it more clear that it's the title of the policy.
Is that what you want to do? We can drop it in there. Is that the practice consistent to the rest of the document? With quotes?
I am not sure. It might mess things up. That's why I'm fine with the way it is. But
yeah,
that's what it is.
You can hear from Mr. Lindsay Poland on that.
Yeah. Mr. Lindsay Poland?
Yeah. I think this came about because we had made a proposal, a number of community members had made a proposal for what should be considered in the deployment of assault rifles. And 607 contains that in the risk assessment. It contains a version of that, at least. But the 607 also includes a number of other things around operations planning that is much more extensive. And to be honest, I'm not sure if you want to assert that every deployment of an assault rifle must have an operations plan, must have an operations briefing, for example. I think the risk assessment is much more relevant to that. I wanted to say one other thing about this section, though, which is that in the subcommittee meeting, which I was out of town and Kathy was very, very gracious and providing a recording, so I listened to it today. And board member Ramsey said, well, it's implicit that anything that is not an authorized use would be a prohibited use. And as one of the public commenters said, several of us proposed that there be a prohibited use for public relations and recruitment. And you wouldn't have to do that if you just said anything that's not an authorized use is a prohibited use, if that were explicit. I think board member Ramsey was saying that was implicit, but that could be explicit.
So where would we drop that to make it explicit?
Right in authorized uses. Those uses that are not authorized are prohibited.
Yeah.
So we drop that in right now, and then we can address whether or not we want to keep it. And then also I have board member Moore is raising his hand to suggest he wants to add something.
I do. Thank you, Chair. And just for the sake of this conversation and the dialogue we're creating, this subcommittee has been the first time that the police force, community members, and the board got together and worked out these changes together. So I want everyone to know that as much as I want as thorough and a extensive review, let's make sure that all the stakeholders are present and being represented. And I want to make sure that Lieutenant Montgomery, sorry, is that correct?
That's right. That's Lieutenant Montgomery.
Lieutenant Montgomery had a chance to also speak on this because we're trying to develop this consensus.
No, his hand is up. And so 1 second though, before we lose the thread, John Lindsay Poland, can you just give us that language to drop with regard to the explicit, and then we'll loop back.
I mean, I would defer to board member Ramsey, but any use, not authorized are prohibited or something like that.
Well, I guess there's two things. First, your point about, hey, we only want to have risk assessment as opposed to other aspects of 607, I tend to agree with you. So I guess we've got to say, maybe keep in where it says risk assessment of policy 607.
Okay. So sorry, Director Lee, can you put that back in? Great. So it must comply with risk assessment of policy 607. And then John Lindsay Poland, you just used that language I thought was pretty clear. Can you say it again so Director Lee has the opportunity to type it in there?
It seems to me that if you're going to put language in this about, saying explicitly that these are the only authorized uses, it should be something that's at the top that applies to all of these authorized uses. It shouldn't be one that's in one.
Not just here. Is there a place that we could drop it on the top?
I mean, I thought that's the whole point of having this policy and required by the statute that you have to have approved authorized use.
How about at the top of page 47 of the packet?
I mean, having if authorized, and I'm fine with putting it in, but I would just say, if you believe that authorized use that things that are not authorized are not prohibited, then there's no purpose in putting authorized uses at all. Then everything would be authorized.
I think in this case, do you think that there's any harm in being explicit though?
I don't think there's harm in being explicit other than, you just start to get more words, but if there would be no purpose in stating authorized uses if other uses were also authorized.
Yeah, right. But I think John Lindsay Poland, your language is offering the.
That's the only reason I'm saying that's why I think it has to be implicit. But whatever language someone wants to put in, that says that, I'm fine.
Okay.
It should go up top and apply to everything.
So let's take a quick look at that. And can we go to page 47, page 1 of the 709? If it's at the top, and then we'll drop back down quickly because we need to move things through efficiently, of course. Go back down. Would it go under 709.1 after purpose and scope, or does it need a new little section after purpose and scope?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I believe I heard Board Member Ramsey say that this review was done by the board members, the police department, and the community, and that they all reached the consensus as to what they were comfortable with. I personally, especially because we have a time limit that we're working with this, if the groups work together and they feel comfortable with it, I'm a little uncomfortable about going back and changing things that everybody agreed to.
I will give a little context in response to that. So we had 2 meetings, I believe it was 2, other than the first introductory one. Mr. Lindsay Poland was at the first and other members of the community. Mr. Lindsay Poland was not able to be at the second, but we had extensive involvement from Ms. Saganor and others as well. From the police department, we had Sergeant Ledoux and Captain Roleri, and and I'm sure Board Member Moore, who chaired it, will confirm this. We agreed on every single thing. There was not, by the time we went through all, and what we did is we went through every recommended change from Mr. Lindsay Poland's memo, as well as a follow-on email from Ms. Saganor, and with input, extensive. We didn't have, everyone was raised to panelists, so everyone could talk all they wanted, whether they were members of the public or anyone else. And we went through every single one of these, and my impression was we essentially had consensus on everyone. There were a couple, maybe that Board Member Moore and I were and I can tell you what it was. It was the 50-something millimeter rifle. Some folks thought that shouldn't be in the Burke BPD arsenal, basically, and it hadn't been used in 15 years. Board Member Moore and I agreed that we shouldn't remove the arsenal, but remove that from the arsenal. And other than that, I thought we agreed on every single thing. And even that, people said after Board Member Moore and I said that we both agreed, they suggested that they understood. They didn't agree, but they said, "Oh, well, we understand that." So that's the context for this. And Board Member Moore, I don't know, I don't want to speak out of turn. I mean, you were the chair. Would you agree with that?
That characterization is 100% on point from my understanding and that where we were at the meeting. And I think we can get back to that same point by the end of this discussion. I still think we need to hear from Lieutenant Montgomery though, because we've yet to hear from him. So I'd like to do that.
So he's got his hand raised, and so I'm just making sure to thread through all these various issues. So we are understanding that the chair and Board Member Ramsey, who are part of the subcommittee, have strongly voiced that there was strong consensus and agreement around the current language. And I'm seeing a little bit of head shaking on the part of John Lindsay Poland. So of course, the purpose of this is to continue to have that conversation, but there's an argument that there was some strong footing. That doesn't mean that we can't change things. Of course, we should be able to change things in consensus here, but we want to make sure that we change things with that context in mind. I get that. And Lieutenant Montgomery is here too, and he's going to speak. Of course, and we're going to give him the opportunity to be fully involved. So we're coming from a strong basis. But first, number one, in terms of making changes that are clarifications that are not substantive, such as what Mr. Lindsay Poland suggested, it doesn't sound like that's something that would alter the consensus, the prior consensus that was built. Is it necessary though to drop that up at the top is what I'm asking of page 1, either under purpose and scope or a new section. I'm hearing from board member Ramsey said he doesn't think it's a problem if you want to put in there, just make it explicit. He thinks it's strong enough that it's implied. John Lindsay Pullen is saying that based upon public commentary, it might be helpful for members of the public or also audience members of this who are reading this document to just kind of see it there in explicit, not in implication. So let's first just really quickly draft that in there and then have Lieutenant Montgomery give his feedback to John Lindsay Pullen. Where do you think we would drop that language in? I'm kind of wondering if it could just be dropped after purpose and scope inside of that section. I want to know what other folks think.
Or potentially in 709.2 policy, that could be dropped in there.
709.2 policy, sure, on page 48, which is page 2 of the document itself. So just a sentence right afterwards. Why don't we just test it out and just put it in there for now, and it'll show up as tracking. So what's your language again, Mr. Lindsay Pullen?
In that context, comply with the provisions of 7071. Those uses of military equipment that are not authorized under this policy are prohibited.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's short and succinct, and it seems to get to the point. Does anyone have a commentary, concern about adding that type of language, which seems to be a clarification of what's implied already, but to make it explicit?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Mr. Lindsay Pullen said at the end.
Are prohibited would be the last two words.
Thank you.
Those uses of military equipment that are not authorized on this policy are prohibited. Okay, I think that seems to capture, from a policy perspective, here's the BPT that members of the department comply with the provisions of Government Code Section 7071 with respect to the military equipment, and then an explicit statement that where it's not authorized, then it's prohibited. And that's already implied, but we're just making it explicit. So I don't see any concerns about that. We're going to drop back to Lieutenant Montgomery, and then we're going to drop back down to the language we were looking at earlier and have a conversation about that. Lieutenant Montgomery?
So my little raised hand doesn't get any bigger when I want to say multiple things. Maybe I could get it set up. We could talk to Zoom and we could get 3 or 4 little hands.
Yeah, they should do that.
Yeah, or just grow. I don't know. Blinking. Okay, so the not explicitly prohibited is pretty exhaustive. What about training? What about cleaning the gun? What about transporting the gun? Okay, all the things that are not prohibited that also make sense around the firearm. Then now you've got to make an exhaustive list. So it's kind of it's like a trap of well, it doesn't say here you shot somebody. You didn't shoot somebody with a gun, but you had it out. You didn't use it for lethal purposes, but you carried it from here to there. Or so it's I think that's just a box, and I understand the idea of having constraints, but that box doesn't feel reasonable. And then we can go back down to the last part. And bear in mind, I'm just catching up on this. I haven't been tracking this subcommittee, so my comments are off the cuff for what they're worth. So I think this is just based on the comments tonight, a misunderstanding of the tools that we use in 607. So yes, in the risk assessment tool, it's a tool that we use when we're planning an operation. For example, the detectives want to do a search warrant on a residence, and that tool is designed to guide their research so that they can provide information to the command structure about what the threats are present at their at what the known threats based on the research. For example, is the person known to carry guns? Have they shot at the police before? Is intelligence saying that the person says, I'm never going back to prison? That the person made those kinds of comments. We try to gather all of those things that increase risk. And we do that not because there's like a sort of a bright line of when it's okay to take a rifle to that scene or not. We do that because it facilitates a discussion. Or with the first half of the sheet, if you look at it, is basically incidents that a combination of these factors would trigger a mandatory consultation between investigative leadership or the leadership running the operation, or basically asking for an operation, and the tactical team leadership. So we can sit down and have a guided conversation about the event that we're talking about and the intelligence or what our investigation has told us, so that we can intelligently plan to either serve the warrant in the investigative group, or sort of have the, if it's a high risk warrant, have the special response team serve the warrant. So it's a tool for making a guided investigation into those factors, and then deciding whether a consultation is necessary, and if necessary, who will be serving the warrant after the consultation. So it's a process that the investigations lieutenant typically goes through with the special response team command, and it has nothing to do with whether a gun will be taken out on those operations or not. Does that make sense? So yes, they are sort of risk factors and that kind of thing, but that's not a guiding factor about the deployment of a rifle or pistol or not. And most of these deployments are not pre-planned events. So most of the use or deployment or taking a rifle out into the field for a call is live in real time. And leadership in the department are, like, for example, me, lieutenant, patrol lieutenant, I'm listening to the call, the sergeant's listening to the call, making sure that it's appropriate. The officers are notifying that they're deploying a weapon. We're making a report about later that we're deploying a weapon, and we're guiding and limiting, make sure that the use and deployment of that weapon is appropriate. That whole structure is a leadership structure, live in real time. There's no time to fill out a form. If somebody starts like last weekend, the shooting breaks out between during a robbery. There's no form. It's all much more fluid than that. The deconfliction aspect is just a set of tools that we have in law enforcement to make sure that our subject of our investigation isn't being investigated by multiple agencies or multiple groups within the department, and that we're all going to show up on our investigation at the same time, causing a conflict or a problem or a dangerous situation. So there are networks that we basically can tell the network, we're doing an operation on this target at this location and this date and time. And if you check that, you can make sure that you're not going to run into another team investigating the same problem or the same person at that location. So they kind of are put together. They're not the same system. They're put together in basically safety planning tools that we have.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't think it's really appropriate for a deployment in this case, although obviously the considerations make you think about why you would or wouldn't take a gun to a certain call.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that feedback. John Lindsay Poland, do you still have your hand up from previously, or do you have a new hand?
No, a new hand. And multiple ones, or maybe only one, I'm not sure. But so just to go back to Board Member Owen's question, I think that the community members, had made a proposal, and the board members considered the proposals, but there wasn't consensus with the community members on some of it, because I think it was similar to what Board Member Mizell said earlier. Like, we understand that the board members are going to make decisions about recommendations. It's not a community piece. But the board members, the subcommittee, considered the recommendations from several community members, not just myself. And among those was a list of considerations for deployment of a patrol rifle that were not only about threats, as Lieutenant Montgomery described, to threats at the site, but considerations of risks to bystanders, to others present, other types of risks that might create harms, unintended harms, that would be good to take into account. Most of this came from OPD's policy. They probably are not controversial they are the types of things for pre-planned operations. I'm not really sure in the 607 policy how you do this if it's not pre-planned, when it's things that are like photographs and maps and diagrams and historical information about the site. That sounds like it's considerations for a pre-planned operation, which is the type of thing that we were proposing, but with the consideration of potential or risks of harm to community members. That wasn't a bright line either. That was a proposal of considerations. There was a list of proposed prohibitions, like for recruitment and for public relations and for routine patrol operations. That was not accepted by the subcommittee, but there was also a list of considerations for deployment of the rifle, which would do something like a risk assessment, but not only risk to officers, but also risk to other bystanders. If you take that out, then you don't have that in here. You don't have a mandate for, okay, if you're gonna deploy these rifles, it's important in a pre-planned operation, then it's important to take into consideration a number of factors that are risks of harm.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Moore and then Board Member Owens.
Thank you, Chair. And I do agree with John Lindsay Poland's description of the account as we went through every one of the proposed recommendations for changes to 709. We took into account everybody's position, including the Berkeley Police, who said that the Oakland list that you guys drew from was too burdensome and would not be effective in the field in real time. And they made the point to say that Oakland is not Berkeley. Taking that into account, what we tried to do was to find a balance between the desire of the community to change the military equipment and how it's used in Berkeley and what we have in our arsenal and what the police says they need, what they believe will keep themselves and the community safe. So that's the balance that I'd like all of our board members. That's the test here. That's the balancing that we need to take into account when we're looking at this document. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Board Member Owens.
So I just want to make a comment. I think there's something lost in this conversation related to these weapons. At least I feel like there is. If the police feel like they need to use this weapon, quite honestly, whatever is going on is pretty serious. And quite honestly, there's risk to harm to not only the officer, but the community. And I personally would feel more uncomfortable if there was a restriction on what they can use to protect me as a community member because there's some fear of some other, I may be hit. Well, I personally would rather them, I'm going to go back to that school situation in Texas. The lack of doing anything was fear of maybe somebody else would get hit or, a child. But by doing nothing is worse than doing something. So I think for me, there's this loss of understanding of if they decide they need to use this weapon, there's something fairly serious going on that they feel like they need to use it. So yes, the community could be harmed because they see this weapon or whatever, but they could also be harmed if they don't see that weapon because the officer is not allowed to use it. There's also potential harm there, which is much more serious than the potential harm of seeing this weapon being utilized. So that's just my feeling about this particular topic.
And thank you. And those are important references in terms of what's happened more recently. That might also be a mix of command leadership. I'm not saying anything about what happened in Uvalde because there's still an ongoing investigation. But in addition to use and ability to choose weapons and bring them to the site, I think there is an important issue of command training and possibly deconfliction issues there, Chad. I just don't know if there's still an ongoing investigation. But thank you for that. I appreciate Board Member Ramsey, Officer Owens, and Board Member Ramsey. You have your hand up, and then Lieutenant Montgomery.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to build on, something that both board members, Member Owens and Board Member Moore talked about, which is really, like he said, this is about balancing public safety versus other issues. I think we have a lot of other policies that, do, get into things like use of force and so forth. But I mean, ultimately, I'm like, an M4, is, I understand it came from an M16. I mean, I was in the Air Force and, that was ours, but it's pretty standard in police departments around the country. And so right now, and like, I think they should have access to it. And we're saying that they're going to use it in defense of life or great bodily injury. So that, to me, I agree with Board Member Owens. I mean, that gives a general, guidance for it that I think is sufficiently limited, and they're going to have some discretion to bring their expertise on how to sort of keep the community safe. So that's my view. I understood someone wanted to say, well, we want to have the risk assessment thrown in there, so we put that in there. But I just don't see this policy looking at it as a vacuum. There are other policies that talk about use of force, et cetera. And that's the context when we discuss this. And I will say, I know it's just because the subcommittee doesn't, did it doesn't mean that the full board, should accept it. But this was one in which we really had extensive discussions. I sort of, it's unfortunate. I think Lieutenant Montgomery's put on the spot. I wish the department had said Sergeant Ledoux, I guess, who's deep into this. But that's the approach I came to it from. So I do think they need to have access to these things. And I think there are other policies that essentially affect when they're going to be able to use. And I think it's sufficient to say use, to protect life or great bodily injury. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a lot of this important information that we're receiving about the context and the amount of time that was put into this. And the value of these. We also want to make sure we get through this because this has a time factor associated with it too. So I'm going to bear that in mind. A time check, it is right now 9:12. Lieutenant Montgomery?
Yeah, so I would echo that point that this is just, this set of policies is about sort of backwards identifying pieces of military equipment and sort of describing them with the community and making sure that happens. That's what this group of policies is about. But we have a group of policies that cover all the aspects, totally valid concerns about, like, when you have a gun, or are you concerned that somebody might get hurt? Yeah, of course. All of our training around this would not be approved by the California State Post if it didn't have, basic firearm safety rules about considering covering your muzzle and never pointing your firearm at anything that you're not willing to destroy, and considering your background and foreground that we go over at every single training. So while I am, new to the context of this discussion, this is something that's expected of every officer, and every officer is trained just to be authorized to carry a rifle in the state. There's quite a bit of control, and also quite a bit of places where the kind of concerns that are natural are covered in other policies. This policy, as I understand it, is a vehicle for sort of backwards communicating about equipment that we have in our inventory with the community related to military equipment. But if you shook the whole policy manual and our whole training manual, you look through all of our lessons plans, I think you'd be satisfied about a lot of those concerns.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Yeah, someone might need their phone on mute or computer on mute. Board Member Harris?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I strongly agree with Lieutenant Montgomery as well as Owens and Ramsey. And I think that we do have to be careful, and there are probably other policies that, we can really hone down on some of this for, but I am a little hesitant to tie their hands during these. There's going to be situations where they need to take action, and when they do, we don't want them being resistant or afraid to do what they need to do because of something that we put in the policy that makes it impossible or very difficult for them to do the job at the time that they need to do it. So
Okay.
I think we're good.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Harris. So lots of folks are, want to not hamstring the BPD and their use of equipment, but also being aware that there is a aspect to this policy wise that's important as well. But also that Board Member Ramsey and Board Member Owens have noted, as has Board Member Moore, that there's been a lot of conversation about this, and Board Member Harris is also noting that sounds like there's a degree of comfort with the amount of work that's gone into this with stakeholders in the public context. But we are doing a final review, so let's keep that in mind. Try to move through this, and I'm trying to figure out what the most effective way to do so. And then also Board Member Ramsey has his hand up. Is that from before, Board Member Ramsey?
Yes, that's from before. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So let's come back to where we were at before. So, and then consider that we need to move through this given the time frames. It's 9:16. So where was, okay, we were at 7:09. Okay, so we just put that in. Okay. Is this okay with folks? It sounds like, it's really meant to be an explication of what's implied. There was a concern raised by Lieutenant Montgomery that maybe this raises other concerns and other types of practices. Does that mean that this needs to be more specific? Those uses of military equipment that are authorized under this policy are prohibited. Would that be interpreted? I think Lieutenant Montgomery was referencing like potentially cleaning equipment as an example, that might then capture that and then require, some type of additional language. I think that general intent is not to do that, of course. It's just actual equipment that are not authorized under this policy, but not like engagement with existing policy that's already authorized. I do want to give voice to that and just check with folks. So Board Member Harris and then Board Member Owens.
Oh, I'm sorry. I actually had my hand up from before.
Oh, sure. Board Member Owens.
I don't think that it's necessary to add this line in here. I think that clearly if it's not authorized by that, you can't use it. So I think that there's no need for this line.
Any feedback from other folks about whether or not to keep this or take it out, and then we should start moving through this quickly. I think Board Member Leftwich.
I don't have a super strong opinion on the subject, but I probably also think that it's not necessary, because otherwise you might have to carve out other than for purposes of maintenance and or transportation or something like that. So I would say overall, I agree with the concept that if it's not authorized, that it's not.
Okay, so not necessarily stated, and by stating it might be overstating. Board Member Levine.
Sorry. Yeah, I would just tell the group that I'm a little uncomfortable with the rapidity of making a blanket approval without kind of hearing what the gist of what I'm approving is. I will confess that I haven't read this word for word, each of these policies, and perhaps that's my own fault and I shouldn't complain, but it seems to me that there's implicit in these regulations and understanding that the Berkeley police have this equipment. It's listed, each item. They already have it. It's also clear that they have them to use them when appropriate. And I'm assuming that these regulations are to limit the use to those situations where it's only absolutely necessary. So on the one hand, I can just take it for granted from the subcommittee that they've done this, and this therefore guarantees that the what's being proposed, and I assume somebody will make a motion to approve, does just what I said. But it doesn't sound like that's the case from what I'm hearing from Mr. Lindsay Poland, that in fact there are perhaps people who have a greater appreciation of the nuance of these regulations and limitations, something that is missing that I might not be aware of. I guess what I'm asking is, and maybe Izzy can answer this, Board Member Ramsey, to make a really concise description of, in fact, what you think has been done here, and whether what you did was taking or editing something that already existed, and did it predate the state regulations that were enacted in December of 2021, which is, only 6 months ago. We haven't been looking at this very long. I don't feel 100% comfortable just saying, okay, you guys did the bare essentials and the police agreed, but the community, the friends who are quite knowledgeable, more than I am about this, feel that there's some things missing. I'd like to hear those things from both sides, and maybe there isn't time for that, but then I don't feel good about not being given the time on something that seems to me pretty critical in terms of oversight of police use of military equipment. It didn't used to be that way.
Can I answer one question, which does this policy predate these new state statutes? My understanding is no. And so the police department sat down with the city attorney's office, actually, and then, between their operational demands and the requirements of the law as interpreted by the city attorneys, they came up with a policy 709, which is also required by the new state statutes that you have to have a policy that authorizes this various military equipment that's categorized. But this was all done afterwards. Then after that, it was obviously went to council, it came back to us, and then in this particular subcommittee, the various community members then scoured that policy and said, here are things that they want to change. And that's what we went over during the subcommittee meeting. There were some points in which clearly, and I should say, just because they have the equipment doesn't mean they could use it. For example, now this is one area where we did disagree. The community wanted the police department to dispose of all of the pepper spray and tear gas, or I think it was tear gas. Okay, and the language was in there, and initially the language in the policy said essentially that they could use tear gas and so forth. But one thing that we recommended, and you'll see if you look down to the tear gas and canister, one, not to throw it away, because there is a debate about whether there should be a carve out for certain circumstances in which tear gas should be used. So we didn't think they should throw away tens of thousands of dollars of tear gas that might in fact later be authorized. But right now it's not. And two, we made sure that this policy reflected the city council resolution that prohibits the use of tear gas. So when there were things like that they might have, but there's a policy that excludes its use, we tried to make that explicit. And then, otherwise it talked about the general authorized use. Like I said, I really see this policy not as a vacuum, but it actually works in concert with like 9 or 10 other policies. Which we talked about, which the PRC and the PAB have gone through extensively to come up with the appropriate use of these types of rifles, for example. And so, I happen to have worked on policy 300. So I'm like, okay, I understand when they're allowed to use a rifle and not. And, all the things about proportionality, like, for example, you just said we use it only when it's absolutely necessary. Well, I mean, there's a whole policy out there about when they should have use of force, which obviously using a rifle is going to be a use of force. So to me, and I feel very comfortable with that policy, you know, and proportionality and necessity that are all baked into that. And so to me, this is sort of the initial policy. As you go down for each section, there's a different piece of equipment and it states its purpose and its authorized use. Like I said, I do think that there are other policies that even further limit these, that just talk generally about use of weapons and a host of other things that I think have been all baked into and well vetted, or I should say, and well baked with the PRC and the PAB. And if someone thinks that those policies are inappropriate, for example, use of force or something, then they should come back and we should do a policy review on these. But to me, this is like, okay, let's get this is the equipment we think they should have, the general use of it. And I think to me, that's the point of this.
And do you think it's clear to everybody that is the trained police officers in Berkeley that there's a connection between these limitations, risk assessment, et cetera, with the particular weapons and the use of force policy and these other limitations to conduct?
Absolutely. And I do believe that even when we were asked which policies to review, we were asked to review 709 plus a bunch of others. And, you know, even some members in the community talked about those other policies. And ultimately, I asked the police department, have any of those policies been, the other policies that have been, you know, reviewed by the PRC, have any of those in the PAB, have any of those been changed, right? Mm-hmm. In the interim since this policy? And they said no. And I said, hey, and both board member and Moore and I said, well, with that representation, then we were willing to, you know, prove this, and didn't go back and review all the other specifics. They said there had been no material changes or substantive changes. So I took that representation to be true, and that's what made me think this is sufficient. And I'm like these. If the public wanted to say, I don't think that the police department should have this particular equipment, which they did. Like, we'll get to this. What is it? What is the M55? Or I can't remember what it is. It's this huge gun that's basically used to disable a vehicle that the department hasn't been used in 15 years, right? And there was an idea like, okay, let's just get rid of that. They haven't used it in 15 years. I think board member Moore and I did not agree with that. And the reason I didn't agree with it was because, look, if there's someone with a truck, you know, mowing down people at the Solano Stroll, and suddenly somehow you need to be able to deploy that thing, yeah, you may only need it once every 15 years. I mean, Henry's doesn't happen very often. It happens, you know, once every 25 years if you need a sniper weapon or so forth. But the very fact that they haven't deployed it in 15 years shows that the department has shown restraint. But I didn't see why you should take any of these weapons away from the arsenal. And these.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that.
No, I'm not saying you were. Yeah. I'm not saying you were. But to me, that's what this was. This is approving them having this in the arsenal with the general use for each particular weapon. And then there are much more specific policies that govern generally how officers are supposed to use weapons, force, et cetera, in particular circumstances.
Well, thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you, Board Member Ramsey. Board Member Leftwich.
So I was just thinking that I think part of the problem is what does use mean? And I was on the controlled equipment subcommittee, and I know this issue's come up before where we probably defined use. And I don't think we need to have everything in this policy. It doesn't need to be completely self-contained, but as long as it's clear somewhere, because I think it's a legitimate concern about using assault weapons in promotional materials. But again, we don't want to have all these exceptions, so it's kind of a tricky issue. But again, I think it comes down to, well, what is use? And if that term is defined somewhere and it excludes, maintenance and transportation, but it doesn't include anything else, because is it clear that images of assault weapons can't be used in promotional materials by this? So, I mean, I would think so, but we're kind of going back and forth. And I do think it comes down to what does use mean? And I do not recall if it's defined someplace.
Board Member Ramsey, is there a definition of use in this context aside from the obviously the use of force policy?
I don't remember. I mean, I sort of thought for each one we're talking about authorized uses. I mean, in terms of the idea of, you know, I don't know. You would have to ask. I mean, maybe look at the government code section or so forth. Otherwise, I think of the general term of it. I mean, I don't know. These are things that I think that also could go into other policies. I mean, we're really, you know, starting to parse and, you know, split hairs in an area that's difficult. I mean, even promotional materials, there's a difference between bringing a gun to the Juneteenth and putting it out on a table and putting a picture of a gun out on the table. I mean, is picture actually a use of the weapon? I mean, a lot of people would argue that's not a use of the weapon. That's a use of a picture. And so, you know, you know, so anyway, to answer your question, I'd have to look. I don't know exactly. I sort of thought generally the term of, you know, actively using the weapon in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I mean, I don't want to be.
I don't see it as carrying from the you know, the armory to, you know, the gun range. Like,
sure. No, I tried. So,
So
I mean,
I was going to speak to that point if the chair would.
I don't see that as use, you know, training on the weapon.
Okay. Thank you. So John Lindsay Pullum.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that because as Board Member Leftwich said, in the ordinance subcommittee that talked about this, there was the focus was on the word deployment. So use of force is obviously a use, but then deployment is you might say is a use short of use of force. The AB 481, which this policy responds to, only has the word use. It doesn't use use of force. It doesn't say deployment. So, and it applies to things that are clearly not weapons that are physically used in a use of force. So a command and control vehicle, for example, is not going to be a subject of use of force, which suggests that the way the statute is using the word use is both deployment and use of force. The statute is kind of, and to respond to Board Member Levine about sort of what's on the table here, it's kind of a container. And I totally agree with Board Member Ramsey that there's nothing, you know, there's existing policies that were not changed. It's a container in the sense that it has an inventory, as Lieutenant Montgomery said. It does define authorized uses, a much more explicit requirement actually than the Berkeley ordinance has. It requires a public hearing. It requires approval by civilian elected officials. That's an important process piece. That's why I say it's a container. And so it's kind of pulling all these things together, some of which are existing, some of which were not fully articulated in existing policies, but are required by AB 481. It also requires oversight, independent oversight. And one of the things added here is that the PAB is the oversight body for this policy. I think that's an important piece for you all to know. And then it also, there's new state legislation, AB 48, on, you know, the tear gas, local tear gas legislation was referenced, but there's also new state legislation on less lethal and chemical agents, launchers and chemical agents, that is also incorporated here and referenced here, as well as in other policies. So that's what I mean, that it's a container and that it kind of brings those things together. I hope that's useful.
Yeah, thank you. And also just you know, as a response to Board Member Leftwich, you know, and Board Member Ramsey, there are authorized uses sections. While there's not maybe a quote unquote definition of use per se, there are sections stating what the authorized use for each weapon is in general. There's some specificity there, in other words. So
Yeah, for each section, there's a purpose and an authorized use for every weapon.
yeah, so it's not like it's not there is no use at all reference. So I just want to put that out there so we all are aware.
I was just gonna, one thing I just wanted to add, sorry, that was the last thing. I also agree that, at the end of the day, I just think that the statement about everything not authorized is prohibited is not necessary as well.
Okay, that's a number of folks now, and I appreciate Mr. Lindsay Pullen's suggestion. But in terms of consensus, you've already heard from several people on the board who are feeling that maybe it's not necessary. Are there any other comments about that? I think we should consider removing that language. Are there any folks who feel that that's a big problem to remove that language? Folks on the board. There's a statement already from folks here that's already implied in there as unnecessary, could cause confusion with regard to being overly broad in a sense. Okay, so I just want to remind folks it's getting late. It's 9:36. This has a time frame on it. Director Lee, can you remind us of the time frame on this? I know there's a kind of complicated, but
the council's taking it up again on July 26th.
Okay, July 26th, and that doesn't mean we're just going to skim through this, but we do need to go through this with some type of focus now. So now that we've chatted it out and gotten everyone's kind of tone and contextual type of concern about this, that's the 26th, and our next meeting is the PAB meeting is the 27th. So we really need to finish it tonight. Otherwise, we're gonna have to do a special meeting in the span of just like 13 days, which is hard to do. So,
well, Chair, if I can remind the board that you agreed to agendize the regulations, not knowing if you would get to it tonight, and that if you didn't get to regulations tonight, you would have a special meeting on the 20th. So you are having a special meeting on the 20th.
right, yeah. So we do have the 20th, but we want to reserve.
Now you are.
No, right. We triggered it by moving it out and by clearly shifting it down to taking down to 9:30 to discuss this important issue. So that means on the 20th, we have a special meeting, and that time is taken up for the regulations. It could potentially, I think, Director Lee, is this make any sense? If we need to, could we use the 20th to continue this conversation? Yeah, I think we'd rather not, but is that a possibility? And then the regulations would be pushed off further though.
Sure, that's up to you.
Okay, what that would mean then, I want all the board members to understand this. That would mean that, which is probably what it would have been anyways. The regulations is going to then sit through August when we're in recess. And then whenever the new director comes back in, that is when we will have to re-engage on the regulations issues. And so Director will have to tie some threads together before Director Lee leaves to make sure that after a whole 6 weeks, we don't come back in and have forgotten where we're at. We just want to make sure we understand that the regs is the other very large priority. This one is bumped up because of the timeframe priority. So let's keep that in mind. We could potentially discuss on the 20th this issue, but that will mean we're shifting the regulations further off again. Though I think we're kind of close-ish on regulations in some ways, right? So let's get back to this and let's focus, see how much we can do. But I can see that people are probably getting pretty tired. Of a proposal, I know whenever I raise setting a time frame, some board members say no, let's keep working through, but others no, that's no way are we going to do that. I'm thinking it's already 9:40. What do you say, 10:15? That's another 30 minutes. Yep, 35 minutes. Let's hit 10:15 and try to cut it off then. Okay, knowing that we'll have a special meeting on the 20th. So we're down to authorized uses, and Board Member Levine has a hand up, and so does Board Member Lapwich.
Well, I was going to say, you were asking what our views were of that insertion of the sentence, what isn't authorized is prohibited. I like it because it's at the preamble and it gives a strong statement about prohibitions and restrictions, which is what this is all about. So that's my view.
So I think we're probably gonna need a roll call,
Vote?
a vote. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and
Yeah, I didn't want to get just
yeah.
authorized because I like it for
Okay.
the reason just stated.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think we'll do a vote on it, but first, Board Member Leftwich, then we'll do the vote. You're on mute, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I had a comment about the tear gas section, so we are not there yet.
Okay, so let's quickly do the vote. Who wants to raise a motion to keep the language? I'm sorry, who wants to do a motion to remove the language? That's probably a better way to do it.
No, this wasn't in here in the first place, so it should be a motion to add it.
I'm sorry, add it, that makes sense, okay. Since it wasn't there to begin with, it's gotta be a motion of adding. Who's gonna make a motion to do so?
I will.
Okay, so Board Member Levine has made a motion to add. Who's going to second that? No one wants to second it? Does that mean the motion fails?
I assume so.
Yeah, okay, so motion fails, we got to remove it. Okay. Sounds good. Then down to authorized uses, and
we're now on to less lethal launchers.
and then less lethal launchers, and Board Member Leftwich, when we get to the tear gas, we'll remember to loop that in. Oh, so any comments about this change language here with the Penn Arms 40 millimeter? Board Member Ramsey?
Just to give a little context to it, the language that is deleted was what was proposed. We noted that that really was not a statement about uses, about authorized use. It was just a statement that they were less likely to result in serious bodily injury. So we put in this language, which we said they should comply with local, state, federal laws and policy in the relevant policies.
Okay. So any thoughts on that? There's good context and reasoning for that from Board Member Ramsey, who's on the subcommittee.
Can you give the page number, please?
Yeah, that is.
It's 16 of the policy, and
Is what, 62 of the paper?
Thank you. I've got it.
Okay, so it's already been deleted. Are there any questions about maintaining the deletion?
One thing I would add now, looking at it, I think it probably should say, rather than authorized use must comply, it should just say use, because these are authorized uses. So it becomes sort of redundant and circular if we have it in a sentence.
Oops,
okay.
Sorry.
All right. So it should say use must comply with local, state, federal laws, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So
That's authorized.
yeah, that doesn't change the substance. That's just a clarification in terms of the grammar. I think that's okay. We don't need to do any kind of vote on that, right? It's kind of a consensus type of thing.
You can see if there are any objections.
Are there any objections to the clarification language? No. Okay. So not hearing or seeing any. And then are there any questions about the deletion of the Penn Arms 40 millimeter, given what Board Member Ramsey has just explained about that? Are there any objections? I'm sorry, what would be, yeah, are there any motions to change?
We need a motion, do we, for every?
No, I think if in the end you'll accept all of the subcommittee's recommendations.
Okay, that's
maybe
fine.
as modified. You don't need to do a.
Yeah, every
You
single
would only need a motion if you're going to.
Can you just briefly explain how that was, why was that in there about the Penn Arms 40 millimeter?
That was I'll take this one, Board Member Ramsey. That was language that was provided by the city attorney and with Berkeley Police. So we saw that language. We don't think it answered the actual question of what is authorized use. So we found language that everyone agreed upon that would spell out exactly what authorized use is.
Okay, I see what, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Moore.
And to be clear, this would apply to all three of the less lethal. And sorry about this formatting issue. When I tried to get rid of the page break, everything went crazy.
Okay, so we just kind of reiterate
So
this language.
Yeah, I got it. So that now I understand. Now on page, it's page 19 is the next one, right?
Okay, that's good. So you can see the same pattern at each of the sections, and then also the actual, there's a deletion for the MyCore, I think it's called.
I got it.
As well, just as there was for the other.
But again, just for my comfort, I'm assuming, like the last discussion about the Berkeley police training and knowledge, they understand the principle here is that these more deadly weapons don't come out unless the others can't be used for some reason, right? The less lethal weapons can't be used. They don't go to the higher ones until okay.
That's baked into policy 300.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So I'm comfortable with that deletion up there and all these changes, but I want to make sure other folks are. So Director Lee, can you? Okay, yeah. So we're just kind of replicating the same language here. It makes sense to me. It's not substantive, it's a kind of a clarification formatting. And then this here we have footnote 303 is designed to reduce potential.
Yeah.
FN 303. I'm sorry, for a minute I read footnote. FN 303 is designed to also deleted, just like the equipment above, the pen and device.
Pen arms and the MyCore.
Okay. Are there any concerns or questions about removing those out of there? I'm not seeing or hearing any. Okay, so so far accepted. Let's keep proceeding. So we took out Lexipol. Okay.
Right.
Good. Okay. Only the chief of police may authorize the delivery and use of tear gas. So, Board Member Leftwich, is this where you had some questions?
Yeah. And so when I first read this, I found this very confusing. And then I got a little context from Board Member Ramsey. I guess this is what the city council language, but it seems to me that if the use of tear gas is currently completely prohibited, then it should say under authorized use, the use of tear gas is prohibited. If there is some carve out, it should say tear gas may only be used for whatever hostage situations or whatever, any carve out. If there is currently no carve out, I think we just change it once there is. So I guess I didn't like this language.
So how would you change the language?
Well, as I said, assuming that the use of tear gas is currently prohibited in the city of Berkeley, I would say under authorized uses, the use of tear gas is prohibited.
So let's make sure to be clear about this. I want to make sure I understand too. Is the use of tear gas prohibited in the city of Berkeley for the dispersal, for crowd dispersal, or is it prohibited at all? Is it not permitted at all?
Can I jump in here for a second?
Yeah, oh, sorry, Board Member Ramsey, and then Board Member Moore.
Yeah, my understanding was that it was prohibited at all. There has been a proposal that the PRC or the PAB recommended that there be a carve out for a special response team. That went up to the I forget the policy of the council. I mean, the committee of the council, the public safety committee. They recommended it, and then apparently it fell through the cracks and has not been approved. So and it's never been brought to council. So what we were trying to do here, and I don't know, I'm not sure whether the department worked in the exact language that we discussed, and I'll defer to Board Member Moore on this. But we said, look, this language should prohibit it completely until the council approves a carve out, and this language should track the current council directive or ordinance, and they agreed on that, and and that they were going to go back and figure out the exact language. So,
Well,
so I
again,
agree.
I do remember that. I do remember some discussion about a carve out, which could be
Yeah,
quite.
so I agree with you
reasonable.
100%. If the annotated council minutes, because those are that's where it was. Whatever those say, that's what we said this should say. I mean, that's the state
But
of
if
the
it's-
law.
I mean, if it's prohibited, it's prohibited. So
I agree, but whatever that says in the council annotated minutes is going to be what is prohibited. And we agree with you, at least I agree with you 100% that this language should track that language.
Yeah, so this language is taken out of the annotated minutes.
I'm not saying this is, because I don't think it is. I actually think that
No,
asked them to go get the language from the annotated code, and this does not appear that they went and got it.
and this language, based on the circumstances, doesn't even make any.
We agree. We agree with you. We think that it
Okay.
should be the same language. We asked that they get the language. This does not appear to be the language that we asked for.
Do we need to look for it right now or flag annotated language? Is there a way to?
I was trying to look it up, and everything I saw just said it is prohibited. But I do recall.
Actually set forth in annotated minutes of the city council.
Okay, is there some way, can someone rapidly pull that up?
I have it in front of me.
Thank you, John Lindsay Ramsey. Yeah. Would you like-
But not sure how I can share it.
Director Lee, is that gonna mess your computer up?
I'll
if
stop
you-
sharing. No, I just have to stop sharing.
Okay, so and then John Lindsay Pullen, if you can please share that language, and we'll, and then Director Lee, while he's sharing it, potentially you might need to punch into a comment or edits the annotated language. Okay, so thank you. And where is it? No, it's just CS gas. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful to highlight it. So MS carried Devaletta Harrison to establish an official city motion card of Berkeley policy. 1, prohibiting the use of tear gas by Berkeley Police Department or any outside department or agency called to respond to mutual aid in Berkeley. And number 2, prohibiting the use of pepper spray or smoke for crowd control by the Berkeley Police Department or any outside department or agency called to respond to mutual aid in Berkeley during the COVID-19 pandemic until such time the city council removes this prohibition. Vote all A's. So number 1 is saying that prohibiting the use of tear gas by the Berkeley Police Department or any department. So it's a general blanket prohibition. It sounds like to me.
Right.
Is that correct? Is that how you interpret it, other folks and Board Member Ramsey?
Yeah, we absolutely said during our subcommittee meeting that we believe that there was a complete prohibition and this language should track. If this is the language from the annotated code, then we said this should track this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Director Lee, just so that we have this, I'll read it out to you and you can type it in if you don't mind, either in a comment, then decide.
Can I ask, is this a quote from the minute?
Yeah, why don't we quote it? So the quotes would be.
Not the minutes, but this is a quote from the minutes. Is that right? Can you click on? Can you click on that link for record City of Berkeley info?
Okay, just to show everybody. Yeah. Would that be clear for you, John Lindsay Pullen?
I am opening it now. I'm not sure if you're able to see it. Are you still seeing the other document?
Yeah, it's just the screen is being shared specific to your Word.
That window, so you may need to share a different screen.
It's giving me welcome to the City of Berkeley Records Online. Oh dear.
All right. Well,
Yeah, took it out. Can you pull up the Word annotated minutes again?
Sure. Yeah. Where we are, I think this was it. Yeah, there we go.
All right, so let's just make sure to capture this language here, and then Board Member Ramsey just wanted a confirmation that it's actually the actual language. But this is what's in the minutes itself. Number 1, prohibiting the use of tear gas by the Berkeley Police Department, comma.
But we don't need to say that.
Yeah, why do we have to quote? Because it's not going to work for the purposes of the policy.
I see. Do you want any more? I was just referencing in case you wanted more specific language there. What should we just say? Just say that it's
Use of tear gas is prohibited.
Prohibited.
by the Berkeley Police.
Not just the use of tear gas is prohibited, period.
or any outside department? Do we need to put that in there?
I don't think, oh,
Mutual aid, because BPD will sometimes engage obviously with other
right,
agencies.
right.
There is a statement of it in policy 300, which might function
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
That's probably a perfect place to grab it from. I think we
Let's
even
grab it
mentioned,
from 300. So 300 has a mutual aid language too.
yeah, I think we even mentioned that during our subcommittee meeting.
Okay, so let's pull it from 300, just try to mimic it. Who has, sorry, can someone pull up 300?
Yeah.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah.
Can you just say authorized uses none? You know, and then if we we go get it authorized, we'll come back and change this too.
Yeah.
That's helpful. What are other thoughts? If someone says authorized uses none, then that includes the scope of it includes mutual aid. Is that the understanding? It's being stated now in open session, but is that the understanding from that type of language that an officer or a member?
Yeah, there's a new California penal code that talks about not basically limiting outside mutual aid resources to certain equipment and work. The whole county is going through it, trying to figure out exactly how to deal with it.
Okay,
but that might mire this policy quite a bit. But yeah, that's the understanding. We're not.
Yeah,
we're not getting mutual aid right now because of it.
Okay, so none, and then Lieutenant Montgomery, you're signaling that when an officer in training sees that they understand that it means no mutual aid even. Do you think that would be the understanding?
So mutual aid is a command level kind of thing that happens. The officers don't interact with mutual aid. They don't negotiate with mutual aid about equipment. They don't deploy mutual aid into the field. So
that's helpful.
Yeah, so I don't think that's going to cause any problems with officers knowing whether they can deploy or not deploy tear gas.
And then for other folks in terms of the public, is this
the one issue we have with none is if you look in the policy, I think you go from tear gas, but then we go to pepper spray.
Oh, nice. And that was very confusing also because it is repeated on the next page.
Right, because we were trying to find a language because it differs slightly for pepper spray versus tear gas. Not slightly, it differed greatly because pepper spray is allowed, tear gas is not.
Yeah, none wouldn't work for pepper spray.
Right,
it's a different product. It's deployed differently. It has different impact.
And that's a different section.
It is also temporarily restricted by the council during use of crowd control because of the COVID-19 pandemic and concerns about breathing.
That's right. So,
but I think this language isn't very precise either, though.
So yeah, that's a good point. But let's first finish up the tear gas. Let's go up to tear gas and finish that, and then we'll come back down really quickly to tailor the pepper spray, which we can, if necessary, go back to the annotated.
Didn't we finish tear gas?
We said none. I just want to make sure of everybody that they're comfortable with none. Without further clarification in the context of the mutual aid stuff. It sounds like it. Board Member Ramsey, are you okay with just none? That would then cover the command issue of mutual aid.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I've got policy 300 pulled up if anybody wants to see it, which is pretty similar.
Okay, and then finally, again, because these documents aren't just for the BPD, but for members of the public, they understand when none is there, it means none as in no mutual aid either.
We don't know what they'd understand, but.
Board Member Ramsey, what's your thought?
I was just going to say that, yeah, I'm fine. I just so you have it in from what's in policy 300. It says, as per City Council Resolution, June 9, 2020, the use of tear gas by employees of the Berkeley Police Department or any outside agency or agency called to respond to mutual aid in Berkeley is prohibited. Then it says pepper spray or smoke for crowd control by employees of the Berkeley Police Department or any outside department or agency called to respond to mutual aid in Berkeley is prohibited during the COVID-19 pandemic or until such time as the City Council removes the prohibition.
Okay, thank you. So it's established that the policy there in the prohibition.
Yeah.
300.3.
300.3.7.
Okay, so that's on the record, and I think it sounds like people are okay with none to include mutual aid. But Board Member Owens has her hand up.
Can I make a suggestion that we refer to the policy number and just have the director go and put that wording into this document? Because we all agree that what's in the policy, we're comfortable with that wording. So we just, in the interest of time, instead of having the director sit there and type all this stuff out, just refer to section such and such in the policy and have her put that wording in there.
I'm fine with that. I trust the director. I will say that that's what we asked the department to do and it didn't happen.
Okay, so that as an alternative to just none. Okay. Director Lee?
I mean, and understand, I guess just slipped through the cracks. I'm not,
because
I'm not pointing blame. I'm just like, just when we, move
Sure.
through.
It just fell through with busyness.
Yeah, because I worked with Sergeant.
I'm not pointing.
We both missed it.
I'm not
Okay.
assigning blame. So we just, if we're moving forward, I'm fine with that. We just got to make sure it happens.
Okay, so instead of none, we're going to insert language in 300.3.7 or 3.3.
3.7. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Now let's move down to tear gas, and we could maybe do the same thing there with regard to pandemic. Use restrictions on
Pepper
the.
spray.
I'm sorry, pepper spray. Apologies.
But why does it say tear gas?
Yeah, I don't know about that was just kind of. Is that a typo?
Well, there's a difference between the pepper spray in the canister and the pepper spray and between the OC in the canister and the OC spray. So this is the canister, which is under the same, has under crowd control restrictions.
Which is,
right.
OC canisters are considered, I believe Lieutenant Montgomery can correct me, but I believe OC canisters are considered to be tear gas. So it's an active agent that is similar to the handheld spray, but more concentrated and distributed in a different way.
Lieutenant Montgomery was kind of shaking his head.
No, so tear gas is, I don't have the exact scientific term, but it's CS gas.
Right.
OC is a different. It's made from pepper, from chili peppers, and that's like when people think of mace. That's the sort of natural form of mace.
Okay.
And that the council a year before all this authorized the use of a larger canister of pepper spray. Those large canisters for protest situations. And
So
then
the
when the
large-
COVID-19 pandemic, they said put all the OC pepper spray away.
Okay.
Can I say, I think I understand.
They're both
what-
sprayed, but one of them is like a very large kind of canister.
And I think I understand what's happening here, and I think we have a little bit of a confusion, which I think I can clarify.
Okay.
There are two sections within this policy 709. One is for pepper spray and one is for tear gas.
Right.
Okay. And I actually think this language here, it looks like tear gas may not be used for crowd control, crowd dispersal.
Right.
If I could share my screen, that is the, okay. Okay.
You got to pull your screen up now, board member.
Okay. You gonna let me share? Okay. So if I share my screen, okay. Oh, I'm making sure I got the right one. Okay. This is it. Here we go. Let me share this for you real quick. Okay. So this is policy 300, right? So there's sort of two parts to this. This is 300.3.7. This blue where I just made blue. That sentence applies to tear gas, which is a full prohibition. Basically says, as per council resolution, use of tear gas is prohibited. Okay. The second one, or the next sentence, is pepper spray or smoke. And that is prohibited. So for crowd control.
Okay, for crowd control. Yeah.
It's prohibited. So it looks like, and I'm not sure whether in the 709 policy, if you pull that back up, whoever has that 709 policy.
Yes.
That's Director Lee. Thank you.
It looks like where we're talking about crowd control here, that was the language that was supposed to apply to the section for pepper spray.
Right.
OC.
Right. And this OC, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna have to lean on Lieutenant Montgomery here. And maybe even if you go up higher where we have a more of a description of what it is this the pepper spray section or is this the tear
Go down a
gas?
little bit, Director Lee.
No, this
Okay.
is
Oleo resin.
this is OC canister, so it's the kind that's used in crowd control.
This is heavy pepper spray.
But is this pepper spray or tear gas? Either one
Pepper
of them
spray.
could be used in.
Pepper spray.
Heavy pepper, heavily concentrated
Pepper.
pepper spray.
Okay, so then this,
Concentrated
what
pepper.
we're really saying, it sounds like that language then is correct that we have. It just should have said, you know,
It shouldn't have said tear gas though.
it shouldn't have said tear gas.
Right.
No, it's
Right.
pepper spray. It's OC.
OC, whatever that is, OC.
And using the language, it would be good to define it because up above it says OC, or so suddenly we're referring to it as tear gas. I mean,
Yeah,
usually
that
if you
seems
have
to be
a
a mistake.
technical thing, you put
That
paren.
seems to be a mistake. So that seems to be a mistake. So
It's a typo.
I think I have seen reference to OC canisters as tear gas in other contexts. I couldn't pull it up
we're
now.
talking here in one section about this particular equipment that is described, which is clearly, it says manufacturer's description. It says OC.
Yeah. And then I want to just double check with Lieutenant Montgomery.
We're talking about OC.
Yeah, I think that's right. Lieutenant Montgomery, are there any cases that you're aware of when they use like larger canisters of OC that is then referenced as tear gas, or concentrated, more concentrated, then it becomes tear gas instead of OC, i.e. pepper spray?
No, it's about the chemical. So CS or tear gas is a different product. It burns into a smoke and it vaporizes, it goes into the air. Pepper spray is a liquid and it's really spicy and it's just a completely different product. Just a completely different.
Can you,
The smoke thing that you're reading off the reg previously, Board Member Ramsey, is that possibly tear gas though? I want to make sure it's absolutely clear here.
No.
No. But can
We
someone,
just need a little more description.
someone
of
page
these
up,
things.
so can someone page up so we can see the full description of what we're talking here about
Okay.
here? Each one of these is
OC.
actually for a different weapon. So here it's OC, fiscal impact, currently owns a major OC. Well, no, because
Sorry.
it's that one, it's right there. It starts at OC. That's the new,
Right.
that's the new
Section.
equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that's describing is my understanding, these OC canisters is the pepper spray.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
My
so-
point was that we used the colloquial terms without
That
defining
would
it.
have been a mistake to have used, it shouldn't say tear gas because it should be applying to oleoresin.
No, I understand that. My point is, like, even in the authorized use,
So
when we
let's
say
change-
tear gas is prohibited,
So let's
we refer
change
to
that to OC.
CS. CS is tear gas, but then we just refer to it. Anyway, my point is that we're kind of going back and forth between.
Yeah, so the
colloquial terms.
correction would be to change it to OC.
Okay, which
On this one,
directly-
right.
Yes. And
I'm
then
just wondering if these things need a little more description because this is very confusing. And
I think-
I don't know, maybe we don't have time to do it, but.
I don't
but
think
there
it's
is-
confusing to the officers who know what OC is versus.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear up there, Board Member
Okay.
Lefkovich. I see what you're saying. I think having the tear gas there probably threw everybody off. So I was kind of a little confused at first and concerned that maybe sometimes pepper spray / OC could sometimes be categorized as tear gas. But it's
No, that wasn't my point though. My point was just using the casual term tear gas in the preceding section that I had originally raised, is that tear gas is CS, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yes.
we never then put paren, AKA tear gas, where we just referred to the term tear gas, but whatever.
So can we quickly run up there, Director Lee, and
Let's see the section.
see grammatical additions of CS when we use the tear gas? So, and then maybe the section right above. So, okay, this is all about CS here. Oh, wait, okay, good. Chlorobenzene malonitrate trial.
I guess we don't use tear gas because we just put
We
none.
only use
So
tear
maybe-
gas once that we just corrected. That's the only place that says tear gas.
Okay, all right.
Okay, are you okay with that, Board Member Lefkovich?
Yes.
Need to put a
Yes.
parenthetical CS after it? Okay. Okay, great.
The rest of the sentence here kind of won't work because the prohibition is only for crowd control. It doesn't spell out against barricaded subjects based on
Right.
circumstance. We still have the use of pepper spray or OC
in the
Rolling
in
down.
regular
Yeah.
patrol, regular tactical uses.
Right, so this isn't correct.
Because it is a chemical agent. I mean, I would suggest that the council said tear gas, they weren't distinguishing between an OC canister and a CS canister. They look the same. They're used in crowd control. They're different agents inside, right? But they are used in crowd control, and they're both chemical agents. We don't know exactly what the council
That's
had
not
in mind.
correct.
But in any case,
Can I just say, I really strongly disagree with us trying to relitigate this thing with the issue about the. We
okay,
should.
but
if we
AB
need-
48, AB 48 does apply.
If we
to this
need to refer to the council resolution, we should just refer to the council resolution. We should not be trying to interpret anything or come up with anything different. This is a hotly discussed issue that was in the purview of the council, and they decided we should refer to, even if we need to say either one, as authorized in the minute of that date. We should put the same thing for both of these. We should not be trying to in any way interpret or.
I'm just saying the state law also governs the use of this agent. That's all.
Yeah, I cannot. Okay, that's fine, but this is purely within the purview of the council, in my view. Other people may disagree, and we were trying to get this language to just mirror the language of the council.
Okay, that makes sense. I think, yes, John Lindsay Poland's comment is, helpful for the broader context of the state, but we're talking about here in the city. And as far as I know, there's no usurpation of what's the language that emerged out of the city by the state, the AB reference.
Well, it's more, it's more restrictive than the thing for is.
Chair, Ms. Mattis had her hand raised.
Okay. Sorry, I can't see the hands right now. Oh, good. Yeah, thank you, DCA Mattis.
Thank you. I just, I thought I have heard reference made to policy 303 with regard to adopting council's intent. I just thought it would be helpful to potentially point the board to special order 2020-0007. You can find that in the Berkeley PD's policy manual. That lays out, I think, in further detail how council's intention is applied to both tear gas and pepper spray or smoke for crowd control.
Can you repeat the number?
Sure. It's
or
special.
Could you share it with us on your screen?
I think it would be best if I did not. If there's, I could do so briefly. Although,
what's the number? I'll share it.
Virtually sharing.
Sure, it's special order 2020-0007. If the easiest way I may recommend for you to find it is if you search for the Berkeley Police Law Enforcement Services Manual.
Yeah, I know where to find that.
Okay, you will find that policy within that. And I just note that that may be helpful to the board in this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, and DCA Mattis, do you have, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but Mr. Lindsay Poland has raised that he believes that there's a potential additional restrictions through AB 48. I'm asking you right on spot, but are you aware of any such that might change this language here on tear gas? I'm sorry, on pepper spray OC?
So AB 48 refers to the manner, controls the manner in which certain, equipment, kinetic energy projectile things and chemical agents can be used, but it doesn't have requirements specifically directed at a use policy. It has programmatic, or it has the manner in which it can be used, but it doesn't have specific requirements for a use policy. So there's no a specific requirement under AB 481 that those restrictions be adopted directly into a policy. Whether that is or is not is a policy determination, not a legal determination.
Okay, so it doesn't change the language there on the OC pepper spray then, given the city's allocated language.
Could I suggest?
I would say it slightly differently to say the police force, the police department is subject to AB 481, as it is subject to all state and federal local laws. But AB 48, sorry, not 481, well, AB 481, but AB 48 does not directly determine and speak to what needs to be in a use policy. And so whether or not these restrictions are adopted into a use policy is ultimately a policy decision, not a legal determination.
Okay, a policy decision that would have been made by city council and is not appropriate at this time for the Police Accountability Board to determine?
It could be a recommendation by the board to council for that. But in terms of my office's role, AB 48 does not require that those restrictions be adopted in a use policy.
Okay, so what we could do, everybody is that concern, but some folks are saying it's not necessary. We could drop a flag in there, a comment about potentially the city council reviewing AB 48 to see whether or not it further restricts the use of OC pepper spray.
Chair Chang, make a suggestion that would be consistent with what you've done with the other pieces. So the launchers, the milk core, and the pen, they're also subject to AB 48. You could use the same language that you dropped into for them for the OC spray, which is basically saying it should be subject to state, federal, local law, and those policies, and the Berkeley policies, and that would basically do the same thing for the OC spray as you're doing for the launchers.
Okay, I'm wondering if Board Member Ramsey, do you have an opinion on that, or Board Member Moore?
I'm fine with saying that and just saying that the use that complies with local, state, federal law, and specifically is 2020-007 or special order -007 and call it a day.
How about we drop those both in, and then that, or at least the 48, and then flag it, at least for city council, so they understand that we've kind of given them opportunity to chime in if they want to on a policy issue.
So some version of this language, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, it would say use must comply with local, state, federal laws and council special order 2020-0007, period. And use the same language for both.
For both the tear gas as well as the pepper spray?
Yep.
Use must comply with local, state, federal laws and policy 300 use of force, policy 303 control
Oh, you're
device.
gonna get rid of the-
No.
She's still writing. She's still writing. So in Berkeley City Council special order, or what's the special?
Well, it's the BPD special order.
Okay,
but-
whatever the title is, BPD special order 2020-007.
Okay. And and a reference to AB 48?
Well, we got that already with comply with local, state, and federal laws.
Okay, so it's captured in there.
007?
I think
Okay.
3 O's and 1 7. Okay, well, use must comply with local, state, federal laws and BPD special order 2020.
But then we're not going to have none. We're getting rid
Yeah,
of
we're not
none.
going to. It looks like we're moving away from none.
I don't know.
But that's in the special order. That's why we reference the special order.
Is it?
Okay.
So it does capture it, but does that create some distance between the actual rule?
No, that is the rule.
Just comply with it. Okay.
The rule is that you can't use it.
Okay.
And that's in the special order.
That's in the special order.
Or does it need to be, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but it could be like prohibited per.
Right. I'd prefer that.
Prohibited per use per
Use is prohibited in accordance pursuant to.
local, state, federal laws and BPD special order 2020.
Yeah.
Well, it's not prohibited.
Right.
That's the thing, is it's not totally.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I don't.
I mean,
well, that's not-
what's the concern that they're gonna like somehow use this language to like argue that it's not
Just why
prohibited?
make people have to go look stuff up? If we just had none, it's pretty darn clear.
Well, with
You're making them
pepper
look
spray,
at.
it's not gonna be none.
What?
With pepper spray, it's not gonna be none.
It's
No,
just-
right. We were talking about
We're talking about tear gas.
tear gas.
So with tear gas,
I would just say none, and then with pepper spray, I would get more nuanced because it is more nuanced.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with this language for pepper spray, but this is something that I think we should just pick one and move it.
okay, so let's say we leave this for pepper spray.
Six
which
is
is
one,
a-
half dozen the other, and we're stuck in the middle.
Okay,
That's right, which we're-
this is
pepper-
tear gas. So
This is
we're,
tear gas.
we're
Wow.
taking this out for tear gas?
Maybe
I
put back,
personally would just prefer the way we had it, just with none.
maybe just leave it the way.
So let me undermine my own none suggestion. It is self-healing. So it wouldn't require us to go through the policy again just to get rid of none. If in 3 months the council decides the pandemic's over, you can have all this stuff back. It would be self-correcting if it was falling on the policy.
You're saying it would have
Do
to
you think they're gonna switch and tear gas? I mean, I can see it more for the pepper spray, that it's tied to the pandemic, but
I can't predict how the council will rule on it, but I know we're working towards carve-outs. That would change things.
yeah, but I guess I'm all for let's change it when it's different. Let's just say what current law is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I understand what you're saying. So I think probably just leave it, as it is with none right now. But I want to make sure other folks are okay with that. If a big dramatic change happens or if a carve out happens and you'll have to adjust this, of course, that's just the nature of the laws. But we have flagged this. We know that tear gas could change, so we could immediately go back in and make the changes if necessary. So none for tear gas. For pepper spray, just comportion with the state and federal laws because of the nuances there, and it's could change due to the city issues with COVID and respiratory issues. We had a hand up, and I want to tell you that's 10:22, so we were beyond what time we're going to stop. Let's try to stop at 10:30. Board Member Owens, did you have your hand raised, Board Member Owens? You're off mute, but for some reason we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Or at least I cannot.
I can't.
Okay. So maybe click mute and click it back on again and see if that triggers it. So now you're on mute, and then maybe click it back off again and see if we could hear you. It's not working.
She tried a couple times.
Okay. If you possibly, Board Member Owens, you may need to call in or come in and out again. If she logs in again, she'll be able to come back on as a panelist. Is that right? Or is she locked out, Director Lee?
She should, if she uses her same link.
Okay.
Depends how she gets back in.
But
She's not
after
gonna be,
this topic, we are gonna need to discuss this at our special meeting, right? So maybe after this, we could just.
Yeah.
call it a night.
yes.
It looks like we're going. It's already 10:30 practically. So that means so everybody understands for transparency. On the 20th, we're going to meet for a special meeting. We're going to finish this, and then we're going to hit regulations when we come back in September. So we got to remember where we are at on regulations in particular. I don't think it's that hard, but we just make sure it's going to be 4 or 5, like 5-6 weeks before we get back to regulations. And
I
that's-
thought we were gonna get to regulations at our special meeting after we finish this.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Sure, if we have time. Yeah, that's true. If we have time, we can get to it. Yeah, I'm
I
just.
think we should really try hard to do that.
Okay, let's try to get to the regulations after this, and if we cannot, we may have to put it off. But we have to everybody read this over again before the 20th too. Anything else that can be done in like 5-6 minutes?
Yeah, there's pepper spray.
We just did pepper spray, right?
No, there's the other spray.
Well, that's that oleoresin capsicum, that is pepper spray.
Yeah, this is The other one was the canister. And
Oh, the
this is-
canister.
Oh, I see.
This is the actual,
So Lieutenant Montgomery, the canister is larger. and then the
Lieutenant, can
spray
you help us?
like a little hand.
Yeah, so the Mark 9 was approved by council for use in, it's just a larger canister, larger size pepper spray, and the concentration might be different, but it was approved by council for crowd control situations, defensive situations and crowd control.
Yeah.
Because it's like a limited, lesser impact as an alternative to CS gas, they approved it.
Because it's made out of pepper.
Then when the restrictions came in, it went back away.
Okay.
But
Now-
it's a same chemical, probably a stronger concentration. I think it rolls out here what the concentration is.
You're saying this pepper spray, the smaller, apparently, is a Mark MK9, is that a smaller canister or is it a bigger canister?
Yeah, so it says right there, manufacturer's description. The MK4 is what we carry typically. The MK9 is this larger canister that we only deploy for crowd control or riot situations. It's a large canister.
So is this section talking about the smaller individualized
Yes.
MK4? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the manufacturer's description is drawing a comparison. MK4 is the normal one. The big one is MK9.
Let me just double check that there's no people read this and won't have a confusion between MK4 versus MK9. Roll up a little bit more up on capabilities, a larger MK9, and then training, etc. It says MK9, but is there a subject heading up there that this is about the MK4?
Yeah. Oh, the other thing that it points out here is that the MK9 is deployed as a fog, like a pressurized aerosol. It's aerosolized.
Okay.
As opposed to pepper spray, which typically sprays out as a stream, a fluid stream. So it's meant to clear the air quicker.
The fog clears the air quicker, or the stream.
So when you deploy it, it's supposed to clear out of the environment by being blown away. It's an aerosol spray.
Oh, the MK9 being an aerosol clears out of the environment quicker.
Right.
That's
Is
interesting.
there any sense that there ought to be a little more narrative about this stuff?
That's all there. That's all right here. It's written right here.
Okay.
So it's so life on aerosol products eventually lose pressure over time.
Okay.
It's a description of the difference in a product, but it's the same or some capsicum spray, but when it comes out of the can, it comes out differently.
The only thing I'm a little concerned about, and it might just because I'm not looking at the other topic heading above it, but I'm worried that someone's reading that it's about the MK9 versus the MK4. So I thought this section was about the MK4 though. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying because that first sentence in the description starts to talk about the MK4.
Right, it's very confusing.
It's telling you the differences between the two products so you understand that they're different.
Okay. Board Member Harris has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to, can we, I don't know who's controlling the screen, but can we go to the beginning of that section? Because I'm
The beginning of this section or the one before it? So here
just-
we are.
okay, right there. Okay, let me just, okay, that's fine. I was trying to figure out which one this is actually talking about. I was a little confused about the MK4 or 9.
Okay, so this is, I think it's page 77 of the packet and page 31 of the military equipment policy.
I say this argues for just using the same language for all three of them and just moving on. Like,
Okay.
it's the same language. It has to comply with the state law and this policy, and we use the same language for all three, and we're done. Instead of trying to like figure out the technicalities of which one's which and which one's not.
Okay, so we can, I don't disagree with that, with like dropping in the same language on this section as well. I'm still personally, like in terms of maybe not looking at it right, I'm still confused whether or not this section is referring to the MK4 or the MK9. I'm looking at it in hard copy too.
There also aren't numbers on this document, which make it hard to, you can't even refer to a section, which makes it more difficult to understand.
So do you think it's important, would this clear it up that below the training where then they start talking about oleo resin capsicum spray.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah.
I move that we use the language that says prohibited, it must comply with local, state, federal law, and special order 2020-007 for all three sections. That's my motion.
Including tear gas?
I second.
Including tear gas?
For all three sections that relate, any section that relates to tear gas or pepper spray, that we use the same language.
Okay, so someone to second it.
I second that.
Board Member Owens seconds it. Do we need to do a vote on this, or just ask if there's objections?
I object to that, so I don't know if you want to do a vote or not, but
Yeah,
I would say use the same language use one language for tear gas and the other language for the pepper spray. It can all be the same for the pepper spray.
So maybe do a vote, Director Lee? What do you think?
Sure. Does
Okay.
everybody understand the motion?
Can
The
you just,
motion is to use this language. Is this, let me make sure with Board Member Ramsey.
yes, that's exact language. in
This language
blue
for
underlined for all sections related to pepper spray or tear
tear
gas.
gas. That's the motion.
Yes.
But can I ask for clarification? Will it be clear that tear gas is prohibited?
That is very clear in special order 2020-007.
so it's clear in the order itself. You just have to get to it. And I think Board Member Leftwich is saying that she'd prefer that it be clear inside the.
I get that, but I just want to at least have this motion because I think we need to move on.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go through and with the roll call.
Okay, on the motion, Chang,
Nay.
Harris,
Board Member
Board
Harrison.
Member Harris, you're muted.
Yes.
Leftwich,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
No?
Levine,
No.
Mizell,
Abstain.
Moore,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
and Ramsey.
Yes.
1, 2, 3. Okay, we have 4 yeses, 3 nos, and an abstention. So motion fails.
Why does motion fail? Yeah, motion carries.
4, okay,
Motion
sorry,
carries, 4-3.
4 to 3, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. And, so it passes. Okay, no worries. And people here understand what that means. So let's move forward then. And we should close up now. So we want to finish up that MK stuff. Let's see if we could do it, or we need to bump it to the 20th. So I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding this. So which canister is this section talking about? What size canister and what potential, is it MK9 or MK4? So I think we're starting on page 77 of the packet, 31 of the policy, while Director Lee finishes up the edits.
Sorry.
I'm confused between MK9 versus MK4, and I think it makes a difference because it's not just about the size. There's also like a concentration issue, and there's different use applications given the size of the fog versus, or the dispersal of a fog versus a stream. I want to make sure I understand which.
Like it's MK9 to me, the way that I.
That's what it kind of looks like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's MK9, and just they grabbed that manufacturer's description probably from the manufacturer's website. They started by comparing it to the MK4, but after you read the whole sentence, it's clear they're talking about how the MK9 is different.
Okay. Is there any regulatory sentence there before that? I know that's taken directly from the manufacturers, and maybe we're not supposed to fiddle with it. Is there some like a parenthetical or a bracket that can be placed before that won't mess up the grammar, that explains that this is a comparison to MK4?
Well, if you look up top, it says the quantity, and it's talking specifically only about MK9 OC spray, 23 canisters in inventory. And then the next one, capabilities, MK9 only. And then the manufacturer's description throws it off, but everything else is talking about the MK9.
Is there somewhere we could put in the bracket, like punch in while? Like the MK4 is an ideal size, blah, 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 blah. Bracket while the MK9 is da da da. Because it appears to be saying the MK9 is 1.3% MCOC.
Maybe this is a typo. And I should check with Sergeant Ledoux.
It may be the wrong manufacturer's description.
No, it's right, because the MK4 is what they wear on their belt. That's
true.
Is that right, Lieutenant Montgomery?
Yes, the MK4 is what officers wear every day.
So maybe it's just the wrong manufacturer's description. They meant to put the MK9 in there.
Wait.
No, because the MK9 would not be the ideal size for patrol officers. It's kind of like a small fire extinguisher size.
That's the thing, is they put the wrong description. They put the description for
Entire
MK4
paragraph.
and MK9. Someone needs to go find the description for MK9 and replace it.
That's what I think is happening. I think maybe this is meant, the manufacturer's description is just for MK4. So we could replace it with MK9 just so there's no confusion here, because this is specifically for a much smaller canister that shoots a short bursts.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because doesn't it say the 1.3 aerosol product? So isn't that the MK9? So it's I think it's saying that I think what they did was they put they talked about the MK4. This is what it does, but then they talk about the MK9 is this aerosol product. It delivers it, blah, 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 blah. I think honestly, if they just get rid of the MK4, because it really has nothing to do with anything,
It doesn't really help.
then and just leave it talking about the MK9, I think it would be good. I think what's confusing everybody is this one part about the MK4 being the ideal size. When this really has nothing to do with MK4.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So Director Lee, do you think you could just find the clarification
Mhm.
on there to manufacture?
I think Ledoux will be able to find the right description.
Okay. Something that is not confusing to members of the public. You guys probably
Can I
get
ask who the manufacturer is? Is it First Defense?
It looks like it.
First Defense. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like Board Member Ramsey is checking it up. But so let's finish the meeting with this. And
Can I share my screen?
oh yeah, let's check the
Okay.
description. Okay, 1.3% MK9. So then that one, right, it has a 1.3 MCOC, so that look in a range of 18 to 20 feet, which appears to be some of the language that's inside of the manufacturer's description in our policy currently. But it has no reference to MK4.
That's why I said just use the part about MK4, because what we're really addressing in this section is MK9. So just remove the line about MK4 and we're done with this.
Just drop it in. So Lieutenant Montgomery, just want to make sure. So this manufacturer's description, there's a model number and a SKU number, but it does track in terms of 1.3% MK9. Is there a size here in terms of volume? It doesn't reference that. Maybe it comes in different volumes and it doesn't matter. I just want to make sure we're not dropping in manufacturers information for like something that's slightly different and that might change the parameters.
Yeah, so that's what I'm just looking at the product safety data sheet, and they don't have a little canned description better than that one in the manufacturer safety data sheet, which is like legally required for chemicals. That's what I'm looking at, and I don't see anything sort of really perfect either.
Okay, so it's at 1.3%. It looks like the same percentage that's for the MK9.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But if we could let Ledoux, who's been knee deep in this, just throw a flag with Kathy if I'm wrong. So there's a possibility I'm wrong. I was a couple times last year. Could be wrong again. I guess that's a possibility.
The entire year, you were only wrong a couple times of everything you've ever done.
I do my best, but I'm human.
Yeah, I think if we just take that sentence out, because it's obvious that was just it's a mistake.
Right.
It definitely is a mistake.
But then doesn't it need some other language in there for a
We
description?
can just change I'm sorry. We can just change that language to reflect what the MK9 says in that on that first.
Sure, I would be more comfortable if we could do that, but also have Sergeant Ledoux check it out too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could use the language that Board Member Ramsey just pulled. Is that the suggestion then? Drop that in and just say, Sergeant Ledoux, please double check.
Yes.
Can you, so there's two different screens. Is Board Member Ramsey, are you able to read that out loud? Or
No, that's okay. I'll just talk to, it'll be the same thing. If we're talking about the manufacturer's description.
okay, you just drop it in. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he can, Sergeant Ledoux can look it up. And we can,
Okay, cool. 1.3%. All right. Is there anything else on this that we need to address before we
No.
adjourn? Okay. We are done with that for today, and then the 20th we'll revisit it. Okay, so now we're on to double check this agenda. We're done with C, public comment. Let me set this clock. Are there members of the public who would like to? Oh yeah, we have Ms.
three
Hagemer,
raised hands.
Palatnik, Ms. Marasovic. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, here we go.
Thank you very much for your work. I know you guys have been working really diligently this evening. I just want to let you know that I still don't know whether the city of Berkeley has a policy about the use of assault rifles for PR and promotional and recruiting materials. I heard Lieutenant Montgomery say that there are uses that are not listed as authorized uses, but are in fact authorized. He called cleaning a gun a use. I wouldn't have thought that was a use, but he seems to think it is. And so he thinks there are uses that aren't authorized, but are still permissible. So it does not follow that because it doesn't say something is isn't authorized, that therefore it's not permitted. So it sounds like it's vague, and I'm sorry to say that it's not going to be clarified by this policy. So I will have to, go elsewhere if I want to get that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Oh, sorry,
oh yeah. Okay.
Ms. Palatnik.
Sorry to contribute to keeping us up any later, but I do want to say a few follow-up things about the direct DPA search. I really supported and appreciated that Deborah Levine and Chip Moore were part of the interviewing of the 6 candidates, but only a total of 6 people did those interviews, which were supposed to have been done again by the mayor and council. And of those 6, one was someone from outside the city, supposedly an expert on police oversight. But another thing that disturbed the community activists is that the city manager created a so-called community panel. She put 3 people only on it. And one of the 3 was a representative of the Police Officers Association, which is not our idea of what a civilian community-oriented panel is supposed to be. So, so those 6 people, I'm glad to hear from Dobby, pretty much agreed on which of the 6 they liked best, that there were 3 they, kind of agreed on. So that's good. But another big problem with the process, it never was made clear how much their evaluations would count, because the last step in the process, the city manager was supposed to decide which of the 6 get submitted to the council. She was supposed to submit 3 of the 6 to the council. So again, an inappropriate insertion of her decision-making for a position that it's so important it be independent of and not beholden to the city manager. So, I hope, in fact, we've said, to the council, please pay more attention to what those panels recommended than to what the city manager ends up recommending. But still, I think the city manager, the mayor and council have a right to do some serious looking at the 6 if they want. And to me, I do want them to look back at the 10, because I do know one excellent candidate who the city manager eliminated, which she didn't have the right to do really. So, you know, it's up to the mayor and council now. I hope they take into account what those interview panels said. I'd like them to get more input from community members besides those three, one of whom was a police representative. And we'll see how it all comes down. But thanks again for listening. And thank you, Dobby. And I appreciate what you and Chip did and your hard work. And it should be taken very seriously by the mayor and council.
Thank you. And then we have Carol Marasovic.
First, I wanted to reference the tear gas discussion that you had. When you were pulling up or trying to identify the annotated agenda, you went to something from 2000 that was on the annotated agenda rather than the discussion in 2002 where the carve-outs were discussed. I actually don't recall the outcome of that discussion, but I can say as far as public comment, there has been extensive public comment when all of these items have been repeatedly coming up before council, that the item should be going to the Police Accountability Board first. So I was concerned when commissioners were discussing, well, we can change this later after council passes this, where there is this deference to council instead of that these items should be coming to you first, which is what the public is saying, for deep discussion on these individual items. And that would include any carve out as is being proposed by the city manager for tear gas regarding crowd control. Because my impression is this item is not dead yet and it needs to be discussed here. I want to comment on what Rivka just said. I'm rather shocked that a member, the Berkeley Police Association would be considered a member of the community. I mean, that's a lobbyist group, and that doesn't seem appropriate at all. I'm not aware of the hiring process, but just having heard that comment, that is rather shocking, and I would hope that the commissioners at some point can weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Alston.
Thank you. On policy 709, I wasn't clear if you actually approved sending it to council or approved the subcommittee's recommendations as amended and moved it to council. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else? Does not appear to be anyone else interested in speaking. Do we have a, sorry, let me stop sharing. Do you have a motion for adjournment?
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
Just to answer the lady's question, we did not approve it. We said that we would continue reviewing it at the next special meeting on September 20th and decide what we send to council.
Yeah.
July 20th.
July 20th.
Sorry, July 20th.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Who was the first motion to adjourn? I thought I heard someone move to adjourn.
I moved. I don't know if I was the first, but
Second.
Okay. Yeah, third. Thanks everybody. I know it's been a long night. See you on the 20th.
hey.
Hey, everybody.